Joe Rogan Podcast, check it out.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan Podcast by night, all day.
So like, we're gonna just sit here and talk for a long time, huh?
Yeah, we were started right now. We were started.
It has begun.
Yes. What was your question, though?
I was gonna ask, like, what if something comes up?
Like what?
You need to like pee or something.
Oh, you can
Like,
totally do
you
that.
can do
Yeah, we'll just pause and
Okay.
just run out and pee.
All right.
That happens.
Okay.
Don't sweat it.
All right.
I want you to be comfortable.
All
Have
right.
you ever done a podcast before?
First time.
Really?
First time.
So tell me where Signal came from. What was the impetus? How did it get started?
It's a long story.
It's okay. We got time. We got
Yeah,
plenty
we
of
got
time.
we got time. Okay. Well, I think ultimately what we're trying to do with Signal is stop mass surveillance, to bring some normality to the internet, and to explore a different way of developing technology that might ultimately serve all of us better.
We should tell people, maybe people just tuning in, Signal is an app that is, explain how it works and what it does. I use it. It's a messaging app.
It's a messaging app, yeah. Yeah,
but-
fundamentally, it's just a messaging app.
Yes.
From
Explain.
lofty aspirations.
Yeah.
It's a messaging app, but it's somewhat different from the way the rest of technology works because it is encrypted. So, if typically, if you want to send somebody a message, I think most people's expectation is that when they write a message and they, press send, that the people who can see that message are the person who wrote the message and the intended recipient. But that's not actually the case. There's, tons of people who are in between, who are monitoring these things, who are collecting data information. And Signal is different because we've designed it so that we don't have access to that information.
So when you send an SMS, that is the least secure of all messages. So if you have an Android phone and you use a standard messaging app and you send a message to one of your friends, that is the least of all when it comes to security, right?
It's it's a low bar. That's
the low bar.
Yeah.
And then iPhone, what is this? Signal.
It's their website.
There you
It's
go.
just showing it.
Yeah. So iPhones use iMessage, which is slightly more secure, but it gets uploaded to the cloud, and it's a part of their iCloud service. So it goes to some servers and then goes to the other person. It's encrypted along the way, but it can be intercepted.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so there's
Like Jeff Bezos' situation.
like Jeff Bezos' situation, exactly.
Yeah.
There's fundamentally there's two ways to think about security. One is like computer security, this idea that we'll somehow make computers secure. We'll put information on the computers and then we'll prevent other people from accessing those computers. And that is like a losing strategy that people have been losing for 30 years. Information ends up on a computer somewhere and it ends up compromised in the end. The other way to think about security is information security, where you secure the information itself, that you don't have to worry about the security of the computers. You could have some computers in the cloud somewhere, information's flowing through them, and people can compromise those things, and it doesn't really matter because the information itself is encrypted. And so, things like SMS, the iMessage cloud backups, most other messengers, Facebook Messenger, all that stuff, they're relying on this computer security model. And that ends up disappointing people in the end.
And so why did you guys create it? Like what was unsatisfactory about the other options that were available?
Well, because the way the internet works today is like insane. Fundamentally, I feel like private communication is important because I think that change happens in private. Everything that is fundamentally decent today started out as something that was a socially unacceptable idea at the time. You look at things like, obvious things, that abolition of slavery, legalization of marijuana, legalization of same-sex marriage, even, constructing the Declaration of Independence. Those are all things that required a space for people to process ideas outside the context of everyday life. And those spaces don't exist on the internet today. And I think it's kind of crazy the way the internet works today, that like, if you imagined, every moment that you were talking to somebody in real life, there was somebody there just with a clipboard, a stranger, taking notes about what you said. That would change the character of your conversations. And I think that in some ways, like, we're living through a shortage of brave or bold or courageous ideas, in part because people don't have the space to process what's happening in their lives outside of the context of everyday interactions.
That's a really good way to put it, because you got to give people a chance to think things through. But if you do that publicly, they're not going to. They're going to sort of like basically what you see on Twitter. You know, if you stray from what is considered to be the acceptable norm or the current ideology or whatever you're supposed to, whatever opinions you're supposed to have on a certain subject, you get attacked, ruthlessly so. So you see a lot of self-censorship, and you also see a lot of virtue signaling, where people sort of pretend that they espouse a certain series of ideas because that'll get them some social cred.
Yeah, exactly. I think that communication in those environments is performative. You're either performing for an angry mob, you're performing for advertisers, you're performing for, the governments that are watching.
Yeah.
And I think also the ideas that make it through are kind of tainted as a result. That like, did you watch any of the like the online hearing stuff that was happening over COVID? Where like city councils and stuff were having their hearings online.
No, I did not.
It was kind of interesting to me because it's like, they can't meet in person, so they're doing it online. And that means that the public comment period was also online, And so it used to be that, like, if you go to a city council meeting, they have a period of public comment where, people could just stand up and say what they think, And like ordinarily it's like, oh, you got to go to City Hall, you got to like wait in line, you got to sit there, But then when it's on Zoom, it's just sort of like anyone can just show up on the Zoom thing, they just dial in and they're just like, here's what I think, And, it was kind of interesting because particularly when a lot of the police brutality stuff was happening in Los Angeles, I was watching those city council hearings and, people were just like, they were just calling, be like, fuck you, I yield the rest of my time, fuck you, like it was just like really brutal and not undeservedly so. And, what was interesting to me was just watching the politicians basically, who just had to sit there and they were just like,
take it,
and it was just like, you get 3 minutes and then there's someone else who gets, and they're just like, okay, and now we'll hear from, like, and, watching that, you sort of realize that it's like, to be a politician, you have to just sort of fundamentally not really care what people think of you, you have to fundamentally just be comfortable sitting, and having people yell at you, for 3 minute increments for an hour or whatever, And so it seems like what we've sort of done is like bred these people who are willing to do that, and in some ways that's like a useful characteristic, but in other ways that's the characteristic of a psychopath,
Yes.
And I think, what we're seeing is that also extends outside of those environments, that like to do anything ambitious today requires that you just are comfortable with that kind of feedback.
Like Trump's tweets. If you watch, if you look at Twitter and look at any of Trump's tweets, when he tweets, watch what people say. It's ruthless. They go crazy. They go so hard at him. So I'm assuming he doesn't read them. I'm assuming he just, or maybe he does and just doesn't say anything, but he doesn't go back and forth with people at least.
No, but I think, Trump is perfectly capable of just not caring. There's like people like, grazing is just like, yeah, whatever, I'm the best. They don't,
Yeah.
And like that's that's politics. But I think, the danger is when that, to do anything ambitious, outside of politics or whatever, requires that you're capable of just not caring, what people think or whatever, because everything is happening in public. I
think you made a really good point in that change comes from people discussing things privately, because you have to be able to take a chance. You have to be daring, and you have to be able to confide in people, and you have to be able to say, hey, this is not right, and we're going to do something about it. If you do that publicly, the powers that be that do not want change in any way, shape, or form, they'll come down on you. I mean, this is essentially what Edward Snowden was warning everyone about when he decided to go public with all this NSA information. He was saying, look, this is not what we signed up for. Someone's constantly monitoring your emails, constantly listening to phone calls. Like, this is not this mass surveillance thing. It's very bad for just the culture of free expression, just our ability to have ideas and to be able to share them back and forth and vet them out. It's very bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the history of that kind of surveillance, there are a few interesting inflection points, like at the beginning of, the internet as we know it in like the early to mid 90s, there were these like DoD efforts to do mass surveillance, and they were sort of open about what they were doing. And one of them was this program called Total Information Awareness. They were trying to start this office, I think called the Total Awareness Office or something within the DoD. And the idea was like they're just going to like collect information on all Americans and everyone's communication and just stockpile it into these databases, and then they would use that to mine those things for information. It was sort of like their effort to get in on this at the beginning of the information age. It was ridiculous. It's like they called it Total Information Awareness. They had a logo that was like, the pyramid with the eye on top of it. Oh yeah, this is their logo.
Oh God!
It's like the pyramid with the eye, like casting a beam on the earth. That bit of Latin there means knowledge is power.
Oh wow!
And interesting, this program was actually started by John Poindexter, of all people, who was involved in the Iran-Contra stuff, I think.
Really?
Yeah. And he like went to jail for a second, then was pardoned or something. But so anyway, they're like,
just so fucked up that these people are in charge of anything.
I know, but what's also just kind of comical is that like they were like, this is what we're gonna do.
Look how crazy this is.
Like this is our plan, and people were like, I don't think so. Like wait
what
a
year
second.
was this?
This was like early mid 90s.
Look at this: authentication, biometric data, face, fingerprints, gait. Iris, your gait. So they're going to identify people based on the way they walk? I guess your gait is that specific? Then automated virtual data repositories, privacy and security. This is fascinating. Because if you look at, obviously no one thought of cell phones back then.
Exactly, right. This is like kind of amateurish, right? So it's like, they're like, this is what we're going to do, And people were like, I don't think so. Even like Congress is like, guys, I don't think we can like approve this, like you need a better logo,
Yeah, for sure. But it's just this whole flow chart. Is that what this would be? What do you call something like this? What are these called? Flow chart, I guess, sort of.
Designed to dazzle you into approving their funding.
It's like baffling to figure out what it is. Like, first of all, what are all those little color tubes? Those little ones, those little cylinders.
Those are data silos.
Oh,
that's the universal.
They're all different colors. There's purple ones. What's in the purple data?
Well, gate.
That's Prince.
That's where gate lives. Yeah.
It's all Prince's information.
But so that this stuff all sort of got shut down, right? They're like okay, we can't do this, And then instead, what ended up happening was like data naturally accumulated in different places. Like back then, if you had been, what they were trying to do is be like, our proposal is that everyone carry a government mandated tracking device at all times. Like, what do you guys think? It'll make us safer, And people were like, no, I don't think so, But instead, everyone ended up just carrying cell phones at all times, which are tracking your location and reporting them into centralized repositories that government has access to, And so, this sort of like oblique surveillance infrastructure ended up emerging. And that was what, people sort of knew about, but, didn't really know. And that's what Snowden revealed was like, instead, we don't have this. Instead, it's like all of those things are happening naturally, your, gate detection, fingerprint, like all this stuff's happening naturally. It's ending up in these places. And then, governments are just going to those places and getting the information. And then I think, the next inflection point was really Cambridge Analytica. That was the moment where I think people were like...
Explain that to people, please.
Cambridge Analytica was a firm that was doing like big data, using big data in order to forecast and manipulate people's opinions. And in particular, they were involved in the 2016 election. And it was sort of, so it's like, what Stone revealed was PRISM, which was the cooperation between the government and these places where data was naturally accumulating, like Facebook, Google, et cetera, and the phone company. And Cambridge Analytica, I think, was the moment that people were like, oh, there's like also sort of like a private version of PRISM, that's like not just governments, but like the data is out there and other people who are motivated are using that against us, So I think, in the beginning it was sort of like, oh, this could be scary. And then it was like, but, we're just using these services. And then people were like, oh, wait, the government is, using the data that we're, sending to these services. And then people were like, oh, wait, like anybody can use the data against us. And they were like, oh, shit. It's like, I think things went from like, I don't really have anything to hide to like, wait a second, these people can predict and influence how I'm going to vote based on what kind of genes I buy, and then, sort of where we are today, where it's like, I think people are also beginning to realize that the companies themselves that are doing this kind of data collection are also not necessarily acting in our best interests.
Yeah, for sure. There's also this weird thing that's happening with these companies that are gathering the data, whether it's Facebook or Google, or I don't think they ever set out to be what they are. They started out like Facebook, for example. We were talking about it before. It was really just sort of like a social networking thing. And this was in the early days. It was a business. I don't think anybody ever thought it was going to be something that influences world elections in a staggering way, like especially in other parts of the world, where Facebook becomes the sort of de facto messaging app on your phone when you get it.
Yep.
I mean, it has had massive impact on politics, on shaping culture, even genocide has been connected to Facebook in certain countries. It's weird that this thing that is in, I don't know how many different how many different languages does Facebook operate under? All of them.
Yeah.
I mean, that this was just a social app. It was from Harvard, right? They were just connecting students together. Wasn't that initially what the first iteration of it was?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think you can say, like, no one anticipated that these things would be this significant. But I also think that there's, I think ultimately, like, what we end up seeing again and again is that, like, bad business models produce bad technology. That, like, the point, what we were talking about before, like the point, Mark Zuckerberg did not create Facebook because of his deep love of like social interactions. Like he did not have some like deep sense of like wanting to connect people and connect the world. That's not his passion. Jeff Bezos did not start Amazon because of his deep love of books. These companies are oriented around profit. They're trying to make money, and they, they're subject to external demands as a result. They have to like grow infinitely, which is insane, but that's the expectation. And, so what we end up seeing is that the technology is not necessarily in our best interest because that's not what it was designed for to begin with.
That is insane that companies are expected to grow infinitely.
Yeah.
I mean, they're literally what is your expectation? To take over everything, to have all the money.
And then
one day.
And then more,
If we extrapolate, we anticipate we will have all the money. There will be no other money.
Yeah.
I mean, if you keep going, that's what has to happen. How can you just grow infinitely? That's bizarre.
Yeah, and that's why, I mean, I think the Silicon Valley obsession with China is, a big part of that, where they're just like, well, that's a lot of people there.
Yes,
that's
a lot of people there.
Can just keep growing.
Yeah, there was a fantastic thing that I was reading this morning. God, I wish I could remember what the source of it was, but it was they were essentially talking about how strange it is that there are so many people that are so anti-human trafficking, they're so pro-human rights, they're so anti-slavery, they're so all the powerful values that we ascribe, that we think of when we think of Western civilization. We think of all these beautiful values, but then almost all of them rely on some form of slavery to get their electronics.
Oh yeah,
and it was just
8 grams of cobalt in your pocket over there. that
Yeah.
were mined by actual child slaves. Well, you know,
Someone had to
yeah.
stick us, like literally, they're getting it out of the ground, digging into the dirt to get it out of the ground. We were talking about it on the podcast the other day. We're like, is there a way that is there a future that you could foresee where you could buy a phone that is guilt-free? Like, if I buy a pair of shoes, like I bought a pair of boots from my friend Jocko's company. He's got a company called Origin. They make handmade boots. And, like, it's made in a factory in Maine. You can see a tour of the factory. These guys are stitching these things together, and it's a real quality boot. And I'm like, I like that I could buy this. I know where it came from. I know that I could see a video of the guys making it. Like, this is a thing that I can feel like I am giving them money. They're giving me a product. Like, there's a nice exchange. It feels good. I don't feel like that with a phone. With a phone, I have this, like, bizarre disconnect. I try to pretend that I'm not buying something that's made in a factory where there's a fucking net around it because so many people jump to their deaths that instead of trying to make things better, say, we're going to put nets up, catch these fuckers, put them back to work.
Yeah.
Is it possible that we would all get together and say, hey, enough of this shit. Will you make us a goddamn phone that doesn't make me feel like I'm supporting slavery?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you're asking maybe, I think
Too much?
I think you're asking, I think that's the same as asking, like, will civilization ever decide that that we collectively want to have, like, a sane and sustainable way of living?
Yeah. Sane and sustainable.
And I hope the answer is yes.
I think a lot of us do. You do, right?
I do.
You don't want to buy a slave phone, right?
Yeah, I mean, but okay, so, I feel like it's difficult to have this conversation without having a conversation about capitalism, right? Because, like, ultimately, what we're talking about is, like, externalities that the prices of things don't incorporate their true cost. That, like, we're destroying the planet for plastic trinkets and reality television. Like.
Well, we could have the full conversation if you like. Let's start with phones, though. Let's start with, because when most people know the actual from the origin of the materials, like how they're getting out of the ground, how they're getting into your phone, how they're getting constructed, how they're getting manufactured and assembled by these poor people. When most people hear about it, they don't like it. It makes them very uncomfortable. But they just sort of go, la, la, la. They just plug their ears and keep going and buy the latest iPhone 12 because it's cool. It's new.
What would they do instead?
Well, if there was an option. So, like, if you have a car that is being made by slaves, or a car that's being made in Detroit by union workers, wouldn't you choose the car, as long as they're both of equal quality? I think a lot of people would feel good about their choice if they could buy something that, well, no, these people they're given a very good wage, they have health insurance, and they're taken care of, they have a pension plan. There's all these good things that we would like to have ourselves, these workers get. So you should probably buy that car. Why isn't there an option like that for a phone? We looked at this thing called a Fairphone. Yeah. We're going over it. You can't even fucking buy it in America. Like, no, America's no options for fair. They only have them in, like, Holland and a couple other European countries.
Yeah. I mean, I think, maybe it's good to, start with the question of phones. I think if you really examined, like, most of the things in your everyday life, there is an apocalyptic aspect to them.
Yes.
I mean, even agriculture, it's just like, the sugar you put in your coffee, it's like, I've been to the sugar beet harvest, it's apocalyptic, it's like, so I think there's just like an aspect of civilization that we don't usually see or think about.
And
day-to-day.
It's a non-conscious, I mean, not non-conscious, but I mean, conscious capitalism would be the idea that you want to make a profit, but you only want to make a profit if everything works. Like the idea of me buying my shoes from Origin, like knowing, okay, these are the guys that make it. This is how they make it. Makes me feel good. I like this. If there was that with everything, like if you buy a home from a guy who built the home Like, this is the man. This is the chief construction guy. These are the carpenters. This is the architect. Oh, okay, I get it. This all makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's the image that a lot of companies try to project. You know what I mean? Like, even Apple will say, it's like designed by Apple in California, right?
Sure, designed.
And I think that's the same as like the architect and the builders that but those materials are coming from somewhere.
That's true. The wood is coming from somewhere. Yeah.
And it's not just wood. There's like petrochemicals, like that whole supply chain is apocalyptic, and you're never going to meet all of those people. And so I think I think it's difficult to be in that market. Like if you want to be in the market of conscious capitalism or whatever, because it's a market for lemons. Because it's so easy to just put a green logo on whatever it is that you're creating, and no one will ever see the back of the supply chain.
That's a sad statement about humans. That this is how. I mean, this is how we always do things. If you let us, if you leave us alone, if there's a way, privacy is so important when it comes to communication with individuals, and this is why you created Signal. But when you can sort of hide all the various elements that are involved in all these different processes, all these different things that we buy and use. And then, as you said, they're apocalyptic, which is a great way of describing it. If you're at the ground watching these kids pull coltan out of the ground in Africa, I mean, you would probably feel really sick about your cell phone.
Yeah. And, but I don't think... I think it's a little more complicated than to say that just like humans are terrible or whatever.
No, I don't think humans are terrible. I think humans are great. But I think if you put humans together and you give them this diffusion of responsibility that comes from a corporation, and then you give them a mandate, you have to make as much money as possible every single year. And then you have shareholders, and you have all these different factors that will allow them to say, well, I just work for the company. I'm not, it's not my call. I just, and you got the guy carving up a steak saying, listen, I'm so sorry that if we have to use slaves, but look, Apple's worth $5 trillion. We've done a great job for our shareholders.
Yeah.
At the end of the line, follow it all the way down to the beginning, and you literally have slaves.
Yeah, I fundamentally agree. And I think that's, that's, anytime you end up in a situation where, most people do not have the agency that they would need in order to direct their life the way that they would want, direct their life so that we're living in a sane and sustainable way. That I think is a problem. And I think that's the situation we're in now, And honestly, I feel like, the stuff that we were talking about before of, people, sort of being mean online, is a reflection of that, that, that's the power that that's the only power that people have. It's like, the only thing that the only thing you can do is call someone a name, you're going to call them a name,
Right.
And I think that it's like, it's unfortunate. But I think it is also, unfortunate that most people have so little agency and control over the way that the world works, that's all they have to do.
And I guess you would say also that the people that do have power, that are running these corporations, don't take into account what it would be like to be the person at the bottom of the line, to be the person that is, there's no discussion. There's no like board meetings. Like, hey guys, what are we doing about slavery?
Well, no, I don't. I'm sure that they do talk about that, honestly.
But they've done nothing.
They've probably done something, or they've probably done what they think is something. But I think it's even the CEO of a company is someone who's just doing their job at the end of the day. That they don't have ultimate control and agency over how it is that a company performs, because they are accountable to their shareholders, they're accountable to the board.
Right.
So, that it's like, I think there is a tendency for people to look at what's happening, particularly with technology today, and think that it's the fault of the people, like the leaders of these companies, and I think it goes both ways. Slavoj Žižek always talks about when you look at the old political speeches. If you look at the fascist leaders, they would give a speech, and when there was a moment of applause, they would just sort of stand there and accept the applause because in their ideology, they were responsible for the thing that people were applauding. And if you watch the old communist leaders, like when Stalin would give a speech and he would say something and there would be a moment of applause, he would also applaud. Because in their ideology of historical materialism, they were just agents of history. They were just the tools of the inevitable. It wasn't them. They had just sort of been chosen as the agents of this thing that was an inevitable process. And so they were applauding history, And sometimes when I see like the CEOs of tech companies give speeches and people applaud, I kind of feel like they should also be applauding. That it's not them, that
Right.
Technology has its own agency, its own force that they're the tools of in a way.
That's a very interesting way of looking at it. Yeah, they are the tools of it. And at this point, if we look at where we are in 2020, it seems inevitable. It seems like there's just this unstoppable amount of momentum behind innovation and behind just the process of creating newer, better technology and constantly putting it out and then dealing with the demand for that newer, better technology and then competing with all the other people that are also putting out newer, better technology. And then
Yeah.
look what we're doing.
Yeah.
We are helping the demise of human beings. Because I feel, and I've said this multiple times, and I'm going to say it again, I think that we are the electronic caterpillar that will give way to the butterfly. We don't know what we're doing. We are putting together something that's going to take over. We're putting together some ultimate being, some symbiotic connection between humans and technology, or literally an artificial version of life, not even artificial, a version of life constructed with silicone and wires and things that we're making. If we keep going the way we're going, we're going to come up with a technology that is going to be ex machina. It's gonna pass the Turing test, and it's going to literally be something that's better than what we are. A better version of a human being.
I think we're a ways away.
Yeah, we're a ways away, but how many ways? 50 years?
The moment that I can put my hand under the like automatic sink thing and have the soap come out without like waving around, then I'll be worried, But
well, that's simplistic, sir. How dare you? Well, here's a good example. The Turing test is if someone sat down with like an Ex Machina. Remember the
Sure.
was one of my all-time favorite movies, where the coder is brought in to talk to the woman. He falls in love with the robot lady, and she passes the Turing test because he's in love with her. I mean, he really can't differentiate. In his mind, that is a woman. That's not a robot. Who was it? Alan Turing? What was the gentleman's name?
Alan Turing.
Alan Turing, that came up with the Turing test. He was a gay man in England in the 1950s when it was illegal to be gay, and they
Killed himself.
chemically castrated him because of that, and he wound up killing himself. That's only 70 years ago.
Oh yeah.
This fucking insane. I mean, just think that this man back then was thinking there is going to be a time where we will have some kind of a creation where we imitate life, the current life that we're aware of, where we're going to make a version of it that's going to be indistinguishable from the versions that are biological. And that very guy, by whatever twisted ideas of what human beings should or shouldn't do, whatever expectations of culture at the time, is forced to be chemically castrated and winds up committing suicide. Just by the hand of humans. Fucking strange, man. Like, really strange.
I mean, worse than strange. I mean, that's.
Oh, yes. Horrible.
Perfect, yeah.
But so bizarre that this is the guy that comes up with the test of like, how do we know when something is, like, when it passes, when you have an artificial person that passes for a person, And then what kind of rights do we give this person? What is this? Like, what is it? Like, if it has emotions, what if it cries? Are you allowed to kick it? You know, like, what do you do? Like, that's, but I made it. I turned it on. I could fucking torture it, but you can't. It's screaming. It's in agony. Don't do that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think about this stuff that often, but it is, it's an empirical test, right? So it's like, it's a way to avoid having to define what consciousness is, right? Which is kind of strange. We're conscious beings and we don't actually really even know what that means.
Right.
And so instead we have this empirical test where it's just sort of like, well, if you can't tell the difference, without being able to see it, then we'll just call that.
I think that is really a lot closer than we think. I think that's 50 years. I think that if everything goes well, I think I'm going to be a 103-year-old man on my dying bed being taken care of by robots, and I'm going to feel real fucked up about that. I'm going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe this. I'm going to leave. And then all the people that I knew that are alive, they're the last of the people. This is it. The robots are going to take over. And they're not even going to be robots. They're going to come up with some cool name for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of most of what I see in like the artificial intelligence world right now is not really intelligence. It's just matching. It's like you show a model an image of 10 million cats, and then you can show it an image, and it will be like, I predict that this is a cat. And then you can show it an image of a truck, and it'll be like, I predict that this is not a cat.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's one way of looking at it that's like, well, you just do that with enough things enough times, and that's what intelligence is. But I kind of hope not. And the way that it's being approached right now, I think is also dangerous in a lot of ways, because what we're doing is just feeding information about the world into these models, and that just encodes the existing biases and problems with the world into the things that we're creating. And that I think has negative results. But I mean, yes, it's true. Like, this ecosystem is moving and it's advancing, whatever. And I think the thing that I think is unfortunate is that, like, right now, that ecosystem, this sort of like really capital-driven investment startup sort of ecosystem, has a monopoly on like groups of young people trying to do something ambitious together in the world. And in the same way that I think it's unfortunate that like grad school has a monopoly on groups of people learning things together, and so part of what we're trying to do different with Signal is it's a nonprofit. Because we want to be for something other than profit. And so we're trying to like explore a different way of like groups of people, doing something mildly ambitious.
Has anyone come along and go, I know it's a nonprofit, but would you like to sell?
Well, you can't do that. It's like encoded in the structure. There's nothing to sell. There's no equity.
It's kind of amazing, though, that you guys have figured out a way to create like basically a better version of iMessage that you could use on Android. Because one of the big complaints about Android is the lack of any encrypted messaging services.
Or just good messaging services.
Yeah, they've just recently come out with their own version of iMessage, but it kind of sucks. You can't do group chats. There's a lot of things you can't do with it, and it's encrypted. But is the new I don't think it's rolled out everywhere too, right? It's not everywhere.
I don't think it's rolled out at all, actually.
Oh, you could get a beta. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I don't know what you're right. So it's like that, Android. So Google for Android makes an app called Messages, which is just the standard SMS texting app, and they put that on the phones that they make, like the Pixel and stuff like that, And then there's the rest of the ecosystem. There's like, Samsung devices, Huawei devices, all this stuff. And it's sort of, it depends, what's on those things. And so they've been trying to move from this very old standard called SMS that you mentioned before to this newer thing called RCS, which actually I don't know what that stands for. I think in my mind I always think of it as standing for too little, too late. But they're trying to move to that. So they're doing that on the device, the part of the ecosystem that they control, which is the devices that they make and sell. And they're trying to get other people on board as well. And originally RCS didn't have any facility for end-to-end encryption. And they're actually using our stuff, the Signal protocol, in the new version of RCS that they're shipping. So I think they've announced that, but I don't know if it's on or not.
I have two bones to pick with you guys.
Yeah.
Two things that I don't necessarily like.
All right.
One, when I downloaded Signal and I joined, basically everyone that I'm friends with who was also on Signal got a message that I'm on Signal. So you ratted me out. You ratted me out to all these people that are in my contact list.
Why do you want it to be difficult for people to communicate with you privately?
Well, me personally, because there's a lot of people that have my phone number that I wish didn't have my phone number. And now all of a sudden they got a message from me that I'm on Signal.
Yeah.
And then they send me a message. Hey, I'd like this from you. I want you to do that for me. How about call me about this? I got a project. So I just wish you didn't like rat me out. I wish there was like a way that you could say, do you want everyone to know that you just joined Signal? Yes or no? I would say no. Another one, those little dots, the ellipsis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you shut that off? Because I don't want anybody to know that I'm responding to a text.
You can turn it off.
Can you turn that off? Oh, okay. So it's in the settings?
Yeah, privacy settings.
Okay.
You can turn off typing indicators, you can turn off.
Okay.
Read receipts, you can turn off. Yeah,
That's a big problem with iMessage. People get mad at you. Like if you see
they
the
saw the
dots
thing,
and then there's
yeah.
no message.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you were going to respond and then you didn't. Like, why don't you just relax? Just go about your life and pretend that I didn't text you back yet. Because I will. But it's not like the dots. Like people are like, oh, it's coming. Here comes the message. And then there's no message.
Yeah, you can turn that off. You can also turn off read receipts so people don't even know if you've read their message.
Yes, that's good too.
Yeah.
Yeah. My friend Sagar has it set up so that if you he texts you, you have 30 minutes, bitch. And then they all disappear. All the messages disappear. He's got
the disappearance. Yeah.
That's kind of a sweet move. I like that.
Yeah. With the like the discovery question of like, you don't want people to know that you're on Signal. It's kind of, so we're working on it, but it's a more difficult problem than you might imagine because you want some people to know that you're on Signal. You know, it's like you want some people
text them.
So you want nobody to know.
Well, me personally, I have a unique set of problems that comes with anything that I do, like with messaging and stuff. It's like I have too many people. I've changed my number once a year. It's just I have multiple phone numbers.
Yeah,
I got a lot of problems. But this is a unique problem with me that it's like all of a sudden I'm getting like, how the fuck does he know? And then I had to ask someone. They go, oh no, when you sign up, it sends everybody on your contact list that's on Signal a message that says you're on Signal. I'm like, oh.
Well, we don't send that actually. Just as a, I know you don't care, but we don't actually know who your contacts are. You know, so
right?
It's like
Signal does though. The app does.
The app on your phone does, and it doesn't even send a message to those people. It's just that those people know
that you're on Signal.
Those people know your phone number, and that app now knows that phone number is on Signal. And
did you do that just to get more people to use Signal? Was it an idea of the reason why? Like why when you sign up for Signal does it send all the other people in your contact list on Signal a message?
A lot of people like it. So a lot of people like knowing who that they can communicate with. And so we're trying to make so. And the other thing is like we try to square the actual technology with the way that it appears to work to people, right? So like right now with most technology, it seems like, you know, you send a message and the person who can see it is the person you sent the message to, you know, the intended recipient, you know, and that's not how it actually works. And so like a lot of what we're trying to do is actually just square the way the technology actually works with what it is that people perceive. And so like fundamentally right now, you know, Signal is based on phone numbers. If you register with your phone number, like some people are going to know that they can contact you on Signal. It's very difficult to make it so that they can't, you know, that like if we didn't do that, you know, they could hit the compose button and see just that they could send you a message. You know, they would just see you in the list of contacts that they can send messages to, you know. And then if we like didn't display that, like they could just try and send you a message and see whether like a message goes through. You know, like it's always possible to like detect whether it is that you're on Signal the way that things are currently designed.
It's interesting also how it works so much differently with Android than it does with iMessage. Like with Android, it'll also send an SMS. I noticed that I can use Signal as my main messaging app on Android, and it'll send SMS or it'll send a Signal message.
Yeah.
It doesn't do that with iPhones.
Yeah, Apple doesn't let you.
Yeah, I found that pretty interesting because I tried to send people messages. I thought it would just send it as an SMS, and it didn't.
Yeah. We would if we could, but Apple
just sent it into the ether.
Doesn't allow it.
It doesn't allow it. Interesting, because Apple's scared of you. Say it. They're fucking scared.
No, I mean they
should be.
Apple is
it's a better version of what they've got. How about that?
I agree, but Yeah, I mean they have a much more complicated answer, but maybe you could distill it down to that.
You guys need to just develop your own version of AirDrop, and then no one will need Apple ever again. That's
Yeah,
what's holding
work on
people back, like a universal AirDrop. AirDrop keeps a lot of fucking people on Apple.
You think? All right.
Oh, it's the best. You make a video, like a long video, like a couple minutes long, and you can just AirDrop it to me. Whereas if you text it to me, especially if I have an Android phone, it
Yeah.
becomes this disgusting
Yeah,
version.
they'll downsample it. And, yeah.
Looks terrible.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, photographs are not too bad. I think that it does it downsample
Sure.
photographs
Yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
but not too bad.
Yeah.
It's like you could look at it; it looks like a
Yeah.
good photograph.
Yeah.
But video is just god awful. It's embarrassing when someone sends you a video and you have it on an Android phone. You're like, "What the fuck did you send me? This is terrible." Like, what did you take this with? A flip phone from the 90s?
Yeah. No,
It's so
yeah.
bad.
But I mean, a lot of that is like, I think the reason the reason why it is that way is kind of interesting to me, which is, it's like these are protocol. It's like when you're just using a normal SMS message on Android. That was like this agreement that phone carriers made with each other in like whenever
2002?
no before that way
Really?
before,
96?
yeah exactly and then they've been unable to change the way that it works since then because you have to get everyone to agree.
Right. And is Apple holding back some sort of a universal standard? Because if they did have a universal standard, then everyone would have this option to use. You could use a Samsung phone or a Google phone. You could use anything, and everybody would be able to message you clearly without a problem. Like one of the things that holds people back is if you switch from an iPhone to an Android phone, you lose all those iMessages.
Sure. Yeah, they're probably doing that intentionally because they
Fucking weasels.
they want people to continue to use iPhones.
Don't they have enough money? Like, Jesus Christ.
There's never enough. John.
That's the
Never
problem.
enough.
That is the problem, right?
Yeah, and I think the thing that everyone's worried about right now with Apple is like Apple. What I said before of like bad business models produce bad technology. Thus far, Apple's business model is much better than Google or Facebook or Amazon or like their business is predicated on selling phones, selling hardware, and that means that they can think a little bit more thoughtfully about the way that their software works than other people. And I think what people are concerned about is that that business model is going to change. That they're approaching an asymptote of how many phones that they can sell, and so now they're looking at like software. They're like, what if we had our own search engine? What if we had our own thing? What if we had And the moment that starts to happen, then they're sort of, moving in the direction of the rest of big tech, which, who knows how they do it, but that's what I think people are concerned about.
They've done a better job at protecting your privacy, though, in terms of like, particularly like Apple Maps. Like their Map app is far superior in terms of sharing your information than, say, like the Google Maps. But the argument you could make is that Google Maps is a superior product because they share that information. Like Google Maps is also Waze now, right? Like they bought Waze, which is fantastic. It lets you know where the cops are. There's an accident up ahead, all kinds of shit, right? But Apple Maps was not that good. I use it because I like the ethic behind it. I like their idea behind it. They delete all the information after you make. If you go to a destination, it's not saving it, sending it to a server and making sure it knows, like, what was there and what wasn't there and how well you traveled and sharing information. They're not doing that. They're not sharing your information, right?
We don't know. It's like I'm sure that they have a policy. I haven't read the policy, and maybe the policy says that. But
supposedly,
so and you're also sort of. You're still in the world of like trying to make computers secure, right? It's like there's probably data. The data is probably accumulating somewhere, and maybe people can compromise those places. We don't know, but for sure, the intent behind the software that they have constructed, I think, has been much better than a lot of the other players in big tech. I think the concern is just that as that software becomes a larger part of their bottom line, that might change.
I wonder if they can figure out a way to have an I don't give a fuck phone or I care phone. Like, you want to have an I don't give a fuck phone? This phone is like, who knows who's making it? But look, it's really good. It's got a 100 megapixel camera and all this jazz, and 5,000 milliamp battery. And then you've got an I care phone. And the I care phone, it's like an iPhone 10.
But what's different about the iCare phone?
The iCare phone, you get like a clear line of distinction. You get a real clear path. This is where we got our materials.
Oh, I see.
These are the people that are making it. This is how much they're getting paid. Everyone is unionized. They're all getting health care. They all have 401k plans. It costs a little bit more. And it's not as good.
If you truly encapsulated all of the social costs with producing that phone, I think it would cost more than a little bit more.
How much more do you think it would cost?
I think some astronomical number. That it's like it's not like I'm sure Apple would prefer not to have child slaves mining cobalt for the batteries that are in their phone.
Is that a thing you can say when a company's worth as much as most countries? Like, they have so much cash.
Yeah.
Can you really say that they would rather not use slaves?
No, I'm
Can
sure.
you imagine?
I'm sure that
like,
at the board
I don't
meeting
want
they're
to go
just
broke.
like,
I only have 14 trillion. What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? I need slaves. I need someone to dig the coltan
okay. Well, so
out
what
of
would
the
you do if you
Congo.
were then?
What would I do if I was them? Well, first of all, I could never be them. It would never work. But if I was, I would say, hey, why don't we open up a factory in America? And why don't
But you gotta mind the cobalt isn't in America.
Why don't we get all of our cobalt from recycled phones? Is that possible? Because
But who's going to recycle them?
That's a good question. I think that's what the Fairphone's trying to do, right? Aren't they using all recycled materials?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Any image I've seen of electronic recycling is equally apocalyptic. There's just piles of shit like in some next to lake in China where people are.
You're bumming me out, man. How about we do?
But I think if you were the CEO of Apple and you were like, this is a priority, we're going to spend however many trillions of dollars it takes to do this.
Your shareholders go, hey, fuckface.
You're fired. Yeah.
Out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. You would have to be the grand poobah of Apple. You'd have to be the ultimate ruler.
But it's not even then, if you were just like, I'm willing to take the hit, I'm going to do, no one can oust me or whatever. I'm the grand poobah,
Yeah.
Then it's like your share price plummets, which means that your employee retention plummets because those people are also working for the equity.
Right.
And, so it's like
Stock
now they're working less, and then they
options.
get poached away by these other companies. It's
dirty companies come and steal your clean employees.
This is what Apple's website says now. It says they're committed to one day sourcing 100%.
Look at this.
But
Completely recycled, every bit as advanced.
We're
committed to one day sourcing. One day. We're planning on the year 30,000.
I mean, it's like they're not
100%.
They're not like sitting around twirling their mustaches. You know what I mean? It's just like everyone
Maybe
likes
they
good things
are.
and not bad things.
Maybe they are. Let me read that again, Jamie. It says 100% recyclable and renewable materials across all of our products and packaging because making doesn't have to mean taking from the planet. Oh, come on, you guys. It's like Nike. It's the same thing too, right? They're all committed to Black Lives Matter and all these social justice causes, and they're using slave labor too. Aren't they? In China, they're using slave labor to make Nikes.
Probably.
So go back to that thing. What are they trying to do?
They have like this. I remember seeing a robot they have that can do, like
Lighter
take
on the planet, right out of the
take
box.
the pieces out of it at a very fast rate than like probably human hands can.
Oh, okay.
So that's why I was trying to dig through here, but I found that.
Well, that would be
I
good.
think that's the robot.
That's the piece-taking robot.
Daisy.
This is Daisy. Don't name her. You name her, you got a problem.
There you go. 2030.
Right?
I guess. Entirely clean energy, which isn't quite as
2030 means transitioning hundreds of our manufacturing suppliers to 100% renewable sources of electricity. Well, that's interesting. If they can actually do that, 100% resource or use all the... If they can figure out a way to do that and to have recyclable materials and have all renewable electricity, whether it's wind or solar, if they could really figure out how to do that, I think that would be pretty amazing. but who's going to put it together? Are they going to still use slaves to put it together? I mean, I guess the people that are working at Foxconn are technically slaves, but would you want your child to work there? You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can say that about a lot of the aspects of our economy, though. You know, who would willingly go into a coal mine?
Yes, right. Yeah.
You know, that there's some element of coercion to a lot of what keeps the world spinning.
Right. And that's when you get into these insidious arguments about or conversations about conspiracies, like conspiracies to keep people impoverished. They're like, well, why would you want to keep people impoverished? Well, who's going to work in the coal mines? You're not going to get wealthy, highly educated people to work in the coal mines. You need someone to work in the coal mines. So what do you do? Well, what you do is you don't help anybody get out of these situations. So you'll always have the ability to draw from these impoverished communities, these poor people that live in Appalachia or wherever their coal miners are coming from. Like, there's not a whole lot of ways out. Like, I have a friend who came from Kentucky, and he's like, the way he described it to me was, man, you've never seen poverty like that. Like, people don't want to concentrate on those people because it's not as glamorous as some other forms of poverty. He goes, but those communities are so poor. Like,
yeah. 40 million Americans, right? 40
Yeah.
million Americans are living in poverty.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that conspiracy is accurate, but that's the one that people always want to draw from, right? They always want to.
I mean, I don't think you need a conspiracy. You know, you have
Poor people.
structural forces. You know,
Yeah.
that like are
Yeah.
doing what they need.
Yeah. That's why it's rare that a company comes along and has a business plan like Signal, where they're like, we're going to be nonprofit. We're going to create something that we think is of extreme value to human beings, just to civilization in general, the ability to communicate anonymously or at least privately. That this is it's a very rare thing that you guys have done, that we decided to do this and to do it in a non-profit way. Like, what was the decision that led up to that? And then was there any, how many people are involved?
Now, yeah, okay, well, now there's, 20-something people, which, do you think that's a lot or a little?
I think that's a little.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, it's always interesting talking to people. Like, a lot of times I'll meet somebody and they're like, oh yeah, you're the person who did like Signal or something. I'm like, oh yeah. They're like, okay, cool. What are you doing now? And I'm like, oh, I'm still working on Signal. And they're like, oh, what is there like another Signal that you're going to do? You're going to do like Signal 2 or
Right.
like, I think it's hard for people to understand that that software is never finished, that there's this, which is something that I really envy about like the kind of creative work that someone like you does, that like I envy artists, musicians, writers, poets, painters, people who can create something and be done, that like you can record an album today and 20 years later you can listen to that album and it'll be just good. It's like software is never finished. And if you stop, it'll just like float away like dandelion seeds.
What happens if you stop?
Because software is not, it's very hard to explain this. It's not, it doesn't exist in isolation. It's a part of the ecosystem of like all software. And that ecosystem is moving, and it's moving really fast. There's a lot of money behind it, a lot of energy in it. And if you aren't moving with it, it will just, stop working. And also it's like, a project like this is not just the software that runs on your phone, but the service of like, moving the messages around on the internet, and that requires a little bit of care and attention. And if you're not doing that, then it will dissipate.
And if you're doing something non-profit the way you're doing it, how do you pay everybody? Like, how does it work?
Yeah. Well, okay. So, the history of this was, I think before the internet really took over our lives in the way that it has, there were the kind of social spaces for people to experiment with different ideas outside of the context of their everyday lives, like art projects, punk rendezvous, experimental gatherings, the embers of art movements, that these spaces existed and were things that I found myself in and a part of, and they were like important to me in my life.
You look like a dude who'd go to Burning Man.
Actually, I am not a dude that goes to Burning Man.
Maybe
I
you're
wish I was.
missing it.
Maybe I've been once. I went in
Yeah.
2000, I think. Yeah.
Early adopter.
It's funny because at the time that I went, people were like, "Oh man, it's not like it
Missed
used
it.
to be." Yeah, it's like, and now people are like, "Have you been?" I was like, "I went once in 2000." Like, wow, that's when it was like the real deal. And I'm like, I don't think so. It's one of those things where it's like, there's like day one, and then on day two, they're like, it's not like day one.
Right,
Like,
of course,
it just gets
of
worse.
course.
Yeah, I don't know. Those spaces were important to me, and like an important part of my life. And as more of our life started to be taken over by technology, me and my friends felt like those spaces were missing online, and so we wanted to demonstrate that it was possible to create spaces like that. And there had been a history of people thinking about cryptography in particular, and and which is kind of funny in hindsight, right? So in the 80s, so the history of cryptography is actually not long, at least outside of the military, and it really starts in the 70s, and there were some really important things that happened then. And in the 80s, there was this person who was just sort of this lone maniac who was like writing a bunch of papers about cryptography during a time when it wasn't actually that relevant because there was no internet. The applications for these things were harder to imagine. And then in the late 80s, there was this guy who was a retired engineer who discovered the papers that this maniac, David Chaum, had been writing, and was really fascinated.
Was he doing this in isolation, or was he a part of a project or anything?
No, I think David Chaum was, I think he's an academic. I'm embarrassed that I don't know. But he did a lot of the notable work on using the primitives that had already been developed. And he had a lot of interesting ideas. And there's this guy who was a retired engineer. His name was Tim May, who was kind of a weird character. And he found these papers by David Chaum, was really enchanted by what they could represent for a future. And he wanted to write like a sci-fi novel that was sort of predicated on a world where cryptography existed and there was a future where the internet was developed. And so he wrote some notes about this novel, and he titled the notes The Crypto Anarchy Manifesto. And he published the notes online, and people got really into the notes. And then he started a mailing list in the early 90s called the Cypherpunks mailing list. And all these people started, joined the mailing list, and they started communicating about, what the future was going to be like and how, they needed to develop cryptography to live their, crypto anarchy future. And at the time, it's strange to think about now, but cryptography was somewhat illegal. It was regulated as a munition.
Really?
Yeah. So if you wrote a little bit of crypto code and you sent it to your friend in Canada, that was the same as like shipping Stinger missiles across the border to Canada.
Wow. So
Yeah.
did people actually go to jail for cryptography?
There were some high-profile legal cases. I don't know of any situations where people were like tracked down as like munitions dealers or whatever, but it really hampered what people were capable of doing. So people got really creative. There's some people who wrote some crypto software called Pretty Good Privacy, PGP, and they printed it in a book, like a MIT Press book in a machine-readable font, and then they're like, "This is speech, this is a book." It's like I have my First Amendment right to like print this book and to distribute it. And then they like shipped the books to like Canada and other countries and stuff. And then people in those places scanned it back in to computers. And they were able to make the case that they were legally allowed to do this because of, their First Amendment rights. Other people moved to Anguilla and started like writing code in Anguilla and like shipping it around the world. There were a lot of people who were fervently interested.
Why Anguilla?
Because it's close to the United States, and there were no laws there about producing cryptography. So I think it's something people place.
They have like 3 cases of COVID there ever.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a really interesting place.
Yeah, I used to work down there. It's
Really? International Traffic and Arms Regulation. It's a United States regulatory regime to restrict and control the export of defense and military-related technologies to safeguard U.S. national security and further U.S. foreign policy objectives.
ITAR.
Yeah, they were closed. Anguilla was closed until like November. They wouldn't let anybody in. And yeah, if you want to go there, they have like, I was reading, they have all these crazy restrictions. You have to get COVID tested and you have to apply. And then when you get there, they test you when you get there. Because they have
keeping it real.
They have no deaths.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I like Anguilla. It's a interesting place.
Yeah, this is what I was reading. They're inviting companies to come move here. Like, come work here.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Come, we'll test the shit out of you, and you can't go anywhere, but come here. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful. I used to work on boats down there.
Yeah? What'd you do on boats?
I was like really, I don't know. I for a while was like really into sailing, and I had a commercial license. I was moving boats around and stuff. But
My parents lived in a sailboat for a while.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, they just
Cruising?
decided to just check out. And this was like, I want to say like early 2000s, somewhere around then.
Nice.
They just lived on a sailboat for a few years till my mom got tired of it.
They go around the world, or?
They were in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
They were all around like that part of the world, and they were in California for a little while on their boat. Yeah, they just decided like let's just live on a boat for a while.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I discovered sailing by accident, where I was like working on a project with a friend in the early 2000s, and we were looking on Craigslist for something unrelated, and we saw a boat that was for sale for $4,000. And I thought a boat was like $1 million or something.
Right.
I was just like, why? The sailboats are $4,000, and this is just some listing. There's probably even cheaper boats, you know. And so we got really into it, and we discovered that you can go to any marina in North America and get a boat for free. You know, that like every marina has a lien sale dock on it where people have stopped paying their slip fees, and the boats are just derelict and abandoned, and they've put it on these docks. And
Really?
Yeah. They'll
You
have
get a
an
boat
auction.
for free?
Yeah, they have an auction. There's usually like a minimum bid of
$50.
$50 or whatever, you know. And most times it doesn't get bid on, and they chop the boat up and throw it away.
Really?
And if you show
So
up,
a functional boat.
well, functional is,
That's the problem, right?
you know,
You got to maintain the shit out of boats.
yeah. So if you put some work into it, though, you can get it going. And so we started doing that. We were like, getting boats, fixing them up, sailing them as far as we could, and then eventually I got a commercial license and started sailing other people's boats. But,
Wow. All this on a whim of how much does a boat cost? You can get a boat for $4,000? Holy shit.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, you're working on boats.
Yeah. I mean, it's a whole world, It's just like, finding that link on Craigslist was like, opening a door to another reality, right? Where it's like,
Yeah.
because it's pretty amazing. Me and some friends used to sail around the Caribbean, and the feeling of like, you pull up an anchor and then you sail like, 500 miles to some other country or whatever, and you get there and you drop the anchor and you're just like, it was just the wind.
Yeah.
The wind that took, like there was no engine, there was no fuel. It was just the wind, and you catch fish, and it's just like
If you want to go real old school, you got to use one of them. What are those fucking sextants?
Sextant, of course. That's
Do
what
you
we
use
did,
one of
man.
those?
Yeah.
No, you didn't.
Yeah.
Did you really?
I was like really into like, no electronics, like it's just complicated, they're expensive or whatever. So we had a taffrail log. You seen one of those things?
No, what's that?
It's like a little propeller on a string that you connect to a gauge, and as it turns, the gauge keeps track of how far you've traveled.
What?
Yeah, so it's like
A propeller on a string?
so it's just a thing that turns a string at a constant rate depending on how fast you're moving. So so it can gauge how much distance you've traveled.
So is the string marked?
No. Like it's just
So
a constant length it's always spinning, and it's always turning the gauge.
And then it reads a number, so it says
So there's just like
how
a
many
dial
miles?
on the number of how many nautical miles you've traveled. Wow. And so then you're just like, okay, well, we started here, and then we headed, on this heading, and, we did that, and we traveled 10 miles, so we must be here, and then, once a day you can take a sight with your sextant, and then you can, do some dead reckoning with the compass. And
Wow.
Yeah,
Dude, you went old school.
Yeah, I once had a job, actually.
Who did you do this with?
Just friends, yeah.
And you gotta have some fucking committed friends, because like the friends had to be, you gotta be all on the same page, because they could be like, hey man, let's get a fucking GPS. You guys are assholes. I don't want to die. I'm not gonna get eaten by a shark. How much food do we have? People die out here, man. This is the ocean.
we didn't really have any money, so it was like, it wasn't like much of a decision. I mean, it's like, to put things in perspective, like, we took a trip to through the Caribbean once from Florida. The way that we got to Florida was like riding freight trains to the, we like hopped trains to get there. It's like this was like low budget traveling.
You guys were hobos.
No, but
That's a hobo move.
It was low bagger for sure. But like, yeah, I was also like just weirdly ideological about it. Where like I had a job once in the Caribbean that was like I was almost like a camp counselor basically, where there was this camp that was like a sailing camp, but it was like 13 teenagers, mostly from North America, showed up in St. Martin and then got on a boat with me and another woman my age, and we were like the adults. And then it was just like we sailed from St. Martin to Trinidad over the course of 6 weeks with these like 13 kids on a 50-foot sailboat.
Who left their kids with you?
That's what I want to know, man. It was like,
is this you?
Oh yeah. So we made me and my friends made a video called Hold Fast that was trying to demystify sailing.
Bro, you've been rocking this wacky hair for a long time.
Dude, I know. Need a haircut. Pandemic.
Wow. Whoa, you had tornadoes out there?
Yeah.
And you caught fish?
Yeah.
So you lived off the fish that you caught, basically?
Yeah, fish, conch, seaweed.
Wow, seaweed.
Yeah.
So when you prepare seaweed, what do? You boil it? You're going to sharpen your fucking knife, son.
I know.
That's
dude.
ridiculous.
I know.
What are you using, a pencil to try to kill that poor fish?
This is embarrassing. This whole video is embarrassing, but so thank you for that, James.
Because you kind of didn't know what you were doing. And here's you with... what are you doing here? You're mapping out where you're at?
Dead Reckoning, yeah.
Dead Reckoning.
Yeah. That position was 50 miles off.
50 miles off? Yeah. So where you thought you were versus where you actually were was 50 miles difference?
Yeah.
And you're going how many miles an hour?
Very slow. If you're doing really well, you're making 5 nautical miles an hour.
5 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. So you're walking. You're basically walking on the ocean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not walking.
It's slow going, but you never stop. That's the thing. You can sail all
Right.
night. You can just keep going,
You're a light jog. Yeah. You're jogging on the ocean.
Yeah, anyway, I was a tyrant with these kids where like we had a nice boat and I disabled all of the electronics and I like disabled the electric anchor windlass.
How long was this boat? How long was this boat?
This was 50 feet. Yeah.
50 feet with 14 kids, you said?
I think 13. Yeah, 50 is a big boat. That's actually a big boat.
Yeah, but it doesn't seem like a lot of room for all these kids.
Yeah, people are like sleeping on the deck and in the cockpit.
Oh my God, that's insane.
Yeah.
Did you feel weird that you're responsible for their food? You're responsible for making sure they don't fight with each other?
Yeah, I mean, I actually enjoyed it. I think it was fun.
Yeah? Well, it seemed like it. Like, you have to make it work. There's no other solution. You're on this boat with these kids.
No, that's true. Yeah.
Do you still keep in touch with those kids?
No, that was sort of like pre-social media.
Right.
So, not really.
They're going to reach out to you now. They go, man, I remember that. That was fucking crazy. Can't believe my parents left me with you.
I can't believe they did either, man.
So did you have to sign any paperwork or anything? Like, how did you take care of these kids?
I'm sure I had to sign something. I don't remember.
You don't remember?
Yeah.
Wow. Was there any time where you were like halfway into this trip, you're like, what have I signed up for?
Oh, sure, all the time, yeah. But I never really been in a situation like that either. And
who has?
I don't know. It's like I didn't even have siblings, like it's like.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, but I was pretty. It was interesting. I feel like I learned a lot, and it was. But I was pretty like tyrannical in a lot of ways, but in a way that I was trying to like encourage. It was fun to see, particularly teenagers who had like a really sort of North American affect about how to be, just like let all of that go over a few weeks, on the ocean where it's just like, it's just us. We're here. There's nobody else watching. We're sleeping next to each other. It's like the kids just getting comfortable with themselves, And I would try and like, so I was like, I am really into rock, paper, scissors.
How into it are you?
I'm undefeated. I never lost.
How is that possible?
So whenever they wanted anything, I would be like, all right, rock, paper, scissors. They would like, can we like do this thing? I'd be like, all right, we'll do rock, paper, scissors. If you win, you can do this thing. If I win, and then I would like pick the thing that was like their sort of deepest fear, where it's like the really shy person had to like write a haiku about every day and then read it aloud at dinner. Like the person who was like really into like having like a manicure, like wasn't allowed to shave her legs for the rest of the trip, like that kind of thing.
Wow.
And so then by the end of it, it was just like, everyone had lost, so everyone was like reading the haiku at dinner and
How are you so good at rock, paper, scissors?
it's just, skill, muscle, intuition.
Intuition. Can we play right now?
You want to play?
Yes.
Oh, but I only play for stakes.
Okay. What do you want to play for?
Okay. How about if I win, I do the programming on your show for a week.
No. That's worth a lot of money. You can fuck off.
What kind of money? What do you think I'm
That's
not?
like-
I'm not saying like the ads or whatever. I'm
It'd
saying
be
like
like programming, like who's going to be on.
yeah, who's going to be on?
That's not possible. We're booked up months and months in advance.
You were so
and
confident until just now. We
No,
could
no,
pick
no.
a month,
That's
few
just-
months
that's,
off. Whatever.
That's ridiculous to flip a coin on that. There's no chance.
I mean, what would be?
Because then you'd
equivalent?
make me have conversation. Listen, the whole reason why this show works is because I talk to people that I want to talk to. That's why it works.
Yeah.
The
Well,
only
you gotta risk
way-
something to play this game.
That's not a risk. That's
It's just
that's,
1 week of your
no. That's
life, Jeff.
abandoning the
It's
show.
1 week of your life.
No, you could bring some assholes on here that I don't want to talk to, and then I'm like, what am I doing? No, impossible.
All right. Well, do you think that there's something of equivalent value?
No,
There's
Of
nothing.
that?
Nothing that I can do.
no. There's nothing that you could give me that would be worth a week of programming on the show. What are you going to give me? You'd
What
have
about
to
a day of programming?
You'd have to give me
What-
a spectacular amount of money.
I sent you a.
It would,
we
like
can't
if
make
order-
this about
but I
money.
would,
Can't
but
make
that's the only way I would be, like the only way, like if you ever put a monetary equivalent to that, it would have to be a spectacular amount of money for me to let someone else program the show. I've never let anybody do that before.
Not even
That was
for 1 day.
No, that was one of the big things about doing this show on Spotify. They could have no impact at all on who gets on, no suggestions, no nothing. The only way it works.
Well, what was up with that dude in the suit outside with the clipboard that was telling me from Spotify?
Oh, he's from the government. He's from the CIA. No, there's no one out there. He's joking. But the only way the show works, I think, the way it works is I have to be interested in talking to the people. That's it. So it has to be. I've like all these suggestions for guests. I go, oh, that guy seems cool. Oh, that might be interesting.
What if I?
Let me read up on this
What
guy.
if it's like for a week I
No.
give you the list of suggestions?
No input.
No, but all right.
No,
Man.
it's not. That's a ridiculous.
Stand real.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Impossible.
In
How
any
about-
case,
How about $5?
no,
No.
no, it's got to be.
Come on,
stakes.
man.
It's gotta be
20
real
bucks?
stakes.
20
No,
bucks. I got
come
20
on.
bucks in
No,
my
no.
pocket.
Money is off the table. We can't do
Money's
money.
off the
Yeah,
table?
Forget that.
All right. Sounds like someone's scared to lose at rock, paper, scissors.
It sounds like someone else is scared to lose it.
No, you're asking me for something that's ridiculous. You don't have anything. You don't have anything that's worth a week of programming on this show. You don't have it.
That's rough.
It doesn't exist.
That's rough.
No, it doesn't. It literally doesn't exist. Like there's not. Like you don't. There's nothing that you can have that you could offer me that I couldn't buy myself.
I'll make
or,
you. I'll make. I'll.
No,
people
no,
I
no.
think will be interesting.
No,
You'll
no,
enjoy
no.
talking with them.
You can't. No.
All right, fine. Okay.
But that doesn't
We don't
do
have to
anything
play.
for me. That does something
No,
for
no.
you.
Of
That
course,
does zero
of course.
for
You
me.
would have if you win. You would name your stake.
I don't have a stake.
Okay.
There's nothing I want from you.
all right, well,
that what you asked from me
then-
is a
then we can't
crazy
play the
thing.
game.
Yeah, we can't play rock paper scissors then, huh? Interesting.
Anyway, we were talking about something else before all of this. We were talking about the evolution of cryptography.
Sailing with children. Sailing with children.
Well, first we were talking about Anguilla.
Yes.
And the fact
Yeah.
that people are moving to Anguilla. Whatever.
Yeah. So how did you learn how to do all this stuff? Was it trial by fire? When you were learning how to use all this, I mean, I don't want to call it ancient equipment, but mechanical equipment to figure out how
sailing
to.
stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. Secret is to begin.
Just start.
Yeah, I mean, so
Like a sextant. Where the fuck does one learn how to operate a sextant and then navigate in the ocean?
yeah, just I would, I started, me and some friends got a boat and we started fixing it up and making a lot of mistakes, and then started taking some trips, and then
Get lost.
yeah, I got lost a bunch. I took a solo trip from San Francisco to Mexico and back on a little 27-foot boat with no engine, and
Whoa.
that's
How long
when
did
I
that
really-
take?
A few months. Yeah.
And the way you did it, did you stay close so I can see there's the shore, so if everything fucks up, I can kind of swim?
Yeah. Well, no, you can't swim. I learned that lesson too.
No? Why?
It's I mean, the closest I ever came to death in my life was just in the bay. In the San Francisco Bay, I was on a boat that capsized, and I was probably 2,000 yards away from shore. And I almost drowned. And I mean, I didn't make it to shore. And yeah, it's just the water's so cold, you know.
You didn't make it to shore.
No, yeah, it's a long story. I was like, a friend of mine was living in San Francisco, and he wanted to learn how to sail. And I was like, you know what you should do is you should get like a little boat, like a little sailing dinghy, you know, and then you can just anchor it like off the shore in this area that no one cares about. And, you know, you could just sort of experiment with this little boat. And so he started looking on Craigslist, and he found this boat was for sale for $500 up in the North Bay. And every time we called the phone number, we got an answering machine that was like, hello, you've reached Dr. Ken Thompson, honorary. I'm unable to take your call, you know. And we were like, what is that? Like, honorary?
It's
like,
a fake doctor.
Is he like a judge
It's
and a doctor? Is
chiropractor.
it you know, like, what is it? You know? And so finally we got in touch with this guy. We go up there, and it's the kind of situation where, like, we pull up, and there's, like, the trailer that the boat's supposed to go on, and it's just full of scrap metal.
Oh,
you know?
boy.
And this guy comes out. He's like, "Oh yeah, this is the trailer. We were gonna do a metal run, but if you want the boat, you know, we'll take the metal off, you know." And we're like, "Okay," you know. And he's like taking us around. He's like, "Okay, the mast is over here," and it's like under some leaves, and, you know. It's like, and then, you know, the hull is in the water here, and he has like a dock behind his house, and the tide is all the way out, so the boat's just sitting in the mud, you know. And I'm like, "Well, how do we get this out of here?" He's like, "Oh, you'd have to come back at a different time." You know, and then you take it over there. And we're like, you told us to come now, like at this time, you know what? Anyway, so we go through all of this thing, you know, and you know, my friend who knows nothing about boats is like, all right, Moxie, like, what do you think? You know, should I get this? And I was like, okay. Oh, and we were like, so what's it, you know, doctor of what? He's like, oh, self-declared. You know, we're like, oh, okay.
He's a self-declared doctor?
Honorary.
Honorary
Yeah.
self-declared doctor. You can do that?
I guess so. Why not? It's just an answer.
Jamie?
Yeah.
Yes.
You
Doctor?
think- yes. I think we should become
I
doctors.
just became one.
I tried that for a while, actually.
Yeah. Did you really?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I never went to college, so.
Did Hunter S. Thompson ever get an honorary degree, or did he just call himself Dr. Hunter S. Thompson? Because he was calling himself Doctor
Same trick.
Hunter
I
S.
was
Thompson
quickly
for a
looking
while.
up how
E-
fast
Edward
I could
Bernays
do
did the
this
same thing.
legally.
Well, Bill Cosby became a doctor for a little bit. They took it back, though. That's when you know you fucked up.
Yeah.
They take back your fake doctor degree.
Yeah. So this guy was like, you know, my friend's like, what do you think, Moxie? And I'm like, all right, Dr. Ken, I would have to consider that. I'm not sure that I would do it, but I would consider taking this boat for free. I'd have to think about it, but I
Wow.
would consider that, you know? And he's like, I might be amenable to that, you know? So we've gone from like, you know,
Okay.
$500 to free. And so we got this boat, you know, and it was,
Sounds
we
good.
had to deal with the metal and all that stuff. We got the boat, and we were just trying to do like a little, we were just trying to anchor it.
Did you bring life vests?
Yeah, I was wearing a PFD, yeah, a type 2 PFD, and we took it to this boat ramp, and it was the end of the day, and the wind was blowing kind of hard, and the conditions weren't that good. But I was like, oh, we're just doing this little thing, this little maneuver, and we were in two boats. I built this little wooden rowing boat, and my friend was going to go out in that with one anchor, and I was going to sail
You
out this.
built it?
Yeah, out of plywood. It's stitch and glue, but yeah. But it, you know, not the sturdiest vessel. So you know, he's going to go out in this little rowboat, and I was going to sail out this this little catamaran, and we had two anchors, and we we're going to anchor, and then we're going to get in the rowboat and row back. And it seemed a little windy, and you know, I got in the boat first, and I got out around this pier and was hit by the full force of the wind, and realized that it was blowing like 20 knots. It was way too much for what we were trying to do. But I had misrigged part of the boat, so it took me a while to get it turned around. And by the time I got it turned around, my friend had rowed out around the pier, and he got hit by the force of the wind and just got blown out into the bay.
Oh,
And
Jesus.
so he's rowing directly into the wind and moving backwards. You
Oh, shit.
Further out of the bay. And I was like, fuck. And I'm on this little Hobie Cat, and it was moving so fast. Like, it was way too windy to be sailing this thing. I've got just my clothes on. I don't have a wetsuit on or anything like that. I have a life jacket and just my clothes, and we don't have a radio. We're unprepared. It's starting to get dark. We don't have a light. And I'm sailing back and forth trying to like help my friend. And it got to the point where I was like, all right, I'm just going to tack over. I'm going to sail up to this boat that was called the Sea Louse. Sail up to the Sea Louse. I'm going to get my friend off of it. We're just going to abandon it. And then we're going to sail this Hobie Cat back if we can. And so I go to turn around, and right as I'm turning around, a gust of wind hit the boat and capsized it before I could even know that it was happening. It's just like, it's one moment you're on the boat, and the next moment you're in the water, And the water was like 50 degrees, like super, it like is a shock, when it hits you. And the boat was a little messed up in a way where I couldn't right it. It had capsized, and then it capsized all the way and then sank. So it was floating
shit.
3 feet underwater, basically. And so I'm in the water, but I'm like a little bit out of the water, but like in the water. And, I had a cell phone that just immediately was busted. And I look at my friend, and he's a ways away now, and he didn't see me. And I was, yelling as loud as I could, but the wind is blowing 20 knots, and it just, you can't hear each other, just takes your voice away. And I was screaming, I was waving. He wasn't wearing his glasses, and he just very slowly rowed away.
Oh my God.
And so then I was just like floating there. It was starting to get dark.
He rowed away. Did he notice that your boat had capsized?
No, he didn't even see me. He thought that I had just sailed somewhere else. Because in his mind, I was the person with the experience.
Do you still talk to this dude?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah.
I'd be like, you motherfucker.
I don't blame him. In his mind, he was the person that was in trouble.
Right.
And,
I understand.
And he thought I just sailed somewhere else.
But that's crazy.
Yeah.
Sailed out of vision.
Yeah, and then, it basically got dark. I could see the shore. I wasn't far away. There's nobody on shore. There's nobody around. And the wind was blowing directly offshore, so you have to swim into the wind and into the wind wave and all that stuff. And eventually I tried swimming, and I swam, directly upwind. And I was like, okay, like if I get separated from this boat and I don't make it to shore, then I'm definitely dead. Like there's just no saving me. So I was trying to go directly upwind so that if I felt like I couldn't make it, I would float back downwind and hit the boat again. And so I tried, I swam for probably like 20 minutes upwind and made no progress. It didn't feel like any progress. In 50 degrees, you have 30 to 60 minutes before you black out. My arms were just, it's like I consider myself a strong swimmer. Like I free dive, all this stuff. And I just, it's like you read these stories about how people die, of just like they succumb to hypothermia on a local hike, or they drown in the bay, and the story is always like, well, Timmy was a strong swimmer, but and you're like, really? Was Timmy really a strong swimmer because he drowned in the bay, And like floating there, it just all came to me. I'm like, wow, this is how this happens. You just make a series of pretty dumb, small decisions until you find yourself like floating in the dark in the bay. There's no one around.
Oh, shit.
And it's a really slow process too. It's like, it's not like, you just come to terms with the idea that like, you're not going to make it. And it's not sudden. It's not like someone shot you or you got hit by a bus or something like that. It's like this hour-long thing that you're getting dragged through all alone. And you realize like no one will ever even know what this was, how this happened. And you think about all the people like Joshua Slocum, Jim Gray, people who were lost at sea, and you realize they all had this thing that they went through, this hour-long ordeal of just floating alone, and no one will even ever know what that was or what that was like, And eventually I realized I wasn't going to make it ashore. I looked back. The boat was like way far away from me. I started, drifting back towards it. I was still trying to swim. I realized at some point that I wasn't going to hit it. I wasn't going to hit the boat on the way back downwind. And I had to just give it all that I had to try to connect with the boat, to stop myself from getting blown past it. And in that moment too, you realize that like uncertainty is the most unendurable condition. That like you imagine yourself making it to shore and relaxing, just knowing that it's resolved, right? And in that moment of like, I might not make it back to this boat, you're like tempted to give up because it's the same resolution. It's the feeling of just knowing, that the uncertainties have been resolved, and you have to really remind yourself that it's not the same, that like you have to give it everything you have in order to survive, and that feeling that you're sort of longing for is not actually the feeling that you want, And I just barely got the end of a rope that was trailing off the back of the hull, pulled myself back on it, almost threw up. Then I was just floating there with the hull, 3 feet underwater. I tied myself to it. I started to get tunnel vision, and really at the last minute, a tugboat started coming through the area, and it was coming straight at me actually. And I realized that it probably just wouldn't even see me. It would just run me over and not even know that I had been there. It's totally possible. And I was just, I was trying to like wave. I could barely lift my arm. I was trying to scream. I could barely make any noise. And somehow they saw me. And they like, it took them like 15 minutes to like get a rope around me. And they started pulling me up the side of the boat. And it was like lining every tugboat is tires usually as like a fender, And I got like wedged in the tires as they were like pulling me up. And I knew what was happening, And I was like, all I have to do is stick my leg out and push against the hull of the boat, to like go around the tires. And I couldn't do it. Wow. And I knew, and I could barely see. And they like swung me around and eventually pulled me up. They like put me in next to the engines in the engine room. I couldn't even feel the heat. And they called the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard came and got me. It was like really embarrassing. And the Coast Guard, like, the Coast Guard guy's like, he's like got all these blankets over me, and he's like trying to like talk to me to like keep me like alert, and he's like, so is this your first time sailing? And I have like a commercial, like a 250-ton like master's license, like it's like you need 600 days at sea to get this license, And I was like, no, I have a master's license. He was like, what? He's like, you're a fucking idiot, man. Like everything changed. The tone totally changed,
Oh my God, dude. That's insane.
Yeah.
Did that change your appreciation for comfort and safety and just life in general? Did it like...
Yeah, totally. I mean, it changed. Well, for sure the next day I was like, it's just like any near-death experience. I feel like you're just like, what are we doing here? Like why are we wasting our time with this? At the time I was working at Twitter, and your coworkers are like, oh, we got this problem with the slave lag on the database, and you're just like, what are we doing, man? Shouldn't we be doing something else? But you can't. I feel like you can't live like that for long. That like.
The what are we doing, man?
It's like it's impossible. The world will like suck you back into it. Yeah.
Yeah. Unless you go to Anguilla.
I mean, a lot of those
Just
early
drink
crypto people are
pina
actually
coladas.
still in Anguilla.
Really?
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah. That's what we were talking about, sailing Anguilla. Yeah. So those people, the people who moved to Anguilla, were part of this moment of like.
How much did that shift your direction in your life, though? Did it change, like the way? Like it seems almost. I mean, I haven't had a near-death experience, but I've had a lot of psychedelic experiences, and in some ways, I think they're kind of similar, in that life shifts to the point where whatever you thought of life before that experience is almost like, oh, come on, that's nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, it changes your perspective, or it did for me, and because also in that moment, it's like, I think you go through this sort of embarrassing set of things where you're like, oh, I had these things I was going to do tomorrow, like I'm not going to be able to do them, and then you're like, wait, why is that the thing that I'm concerned about? It's like, it's sort of
trivial things.
Yeah, trivial. We're just like, oh, I was going to see that person tomorrow. I'm not going to see that. Or it's just like, you're like, I feel like I remember I was supposed to meet somebody the next day. I remember being worried that they would think that I like stood them up or something. You know what I mean? Like that I.
You have the
didn't show,
awesomest excuse ever.
I'm
just
dead.
tell them that story the way you just told it to me, and they're gonna be like, oh, good dude, we're good. Shit, fuck, glad you're all right.
Yeah,
my God,
just that kind of stuff, and then you get more into the, it changes the way you think about things, and certainly it's like I was working at Twitter at the time, and I think it made me think about how I was spending my life, and I was, it's like even. I remember the first day that I was at Twitter. At the time, the most popular person on Twitter was Justin Bieber. He had more followers than any other person.
Was that when you guys were trying to rig it so that he wasn't trending #1 always? Because they did do that, right?
I don't remember that. No, I wasn't. I don't remember that.
Conveniently. Because Jamie and I were talking about that one day because they had to do something, because if they didn't do something, Justin Bieber would be the #1 topic every day, no matter what was happening in the world.
I can believe that they wanted to change that because the problem was, at the time, Twitter was held together with like, bubble gum and like dental floss or whatever, So it's like every time Bieber would tweet, like, the lights would dim and like the building would like kind of shake a little bit,
Here it goes. So they block me from trending. This is 2010. I'm actually honored, not even mad. Well, he's also 12. Then I get on and see yet again, my fans are unstoppable. Love you. Okay.
But okay, so there's, people talk about like invisible labor, like the invisible labor behind that tweet. Is just kind of comical because it's like when he did that, people like, it's like my first day there, it's like he tweeted something and, the building's like kind of shaking and like alarms are going off. People are like scrambling around, and it was just this, it's like this realization where you're just like, never in my life did I think that anything Justin Bieber did would like really affect me in any like deep way, and then here I am just like scrambling around to like facilitate.
What are your thoughts on curating what trends and what doesn't trend, and whether or not social media should have any sort of obligation in terms of how things, whether or not people see things like shadow banning and things along those lines? Like, I'm very torn on this stuff because I think that things should just be. And if you have a situation where Justin Bieber is the most popular thing on the internet, that's just what it is. It is what it is. But I also get it. I get how you would say, well, this is going to fuck up our whole program, like what we're trying to do with this thing.
What do you mean, fuck up our whole program?
Well, what you're trying to do with Twitter, I mean, I would assume what you're trying to do is give people a place where they could share important information and, have people, I mean, Twitter has been used successfully to overturn governments. I mean, there's Twitter has been used to break news on very important events and alert people to danger. And there's so many positive things about Twitter. And if it's overwhelmed by Justin Bieber and Justin Bieber fan accounts and Justin Bieber, if it's overwhelmed and the top 10 things that are trending are all nonsense, I could see how someone would think we're going to do a good thing by suppressing that.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Well, why do you think they did suppress that? What do you think? You worked there. Why do you think they kept him from trending?
Well, I mean, I don't know about that specific situation. I mean, I think, looking at the larger picture, right? Like, in a way, it's like if you think about like 20 years ago, whenever anybody talked about like society, everyone would always say like the problem is the media. It's like the media, man. If only we could change the media. And a lot of people who were interested in like a better and brighter future were really focused on self-publishing. There were whole conferences about it, underground publishing conference, now the Allied Media Conference. People were writing zines. People were getting their own printing presses. People, we were convinced that if we made publishing more equitable, if everybody had the equal ability to like produce and consume content, that the world would change. And in some ways, like what we have today is like the fantasy of, those dreams from 20 years ago. But in a couple of ways, one, it was the dream that if, a cop kills some random person in the suburbs of St. Louis, that like everyone would know about it, everyone knows. And also that anybody could share their weird ideas about the world, And I think in some ways we were wrong, that we thought the world we got today is like, yeah, like if a cop kills somebody in the suburbs of St. Louis, like everybody knows about it. I think we overestimated how much that would matter. And I think we also believed that the things that everyone would be sharing were like our weird ideas about the world. And instead we got like, flat earth and anti-vax and like, all this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, in a sense, like I'm glad that those things exist because they're sort of what we wanted, But I think what we underestimated is like how important the medium is. Like the medium is the message kind of thing, and that like what we were doing at the time of like, you know, writing zines and sharing information, I don't think we understood how much that was predicated on like actually building community and like relationships with each other, and that like just like what we didn't want was just like more channels on the television, and that's sort of what we got, you know. And so I think, you know, it's like everyone is like on YouTube trying to monetize their content, whatever, you know, and that it's the same thing, you know, like bad business models produce like bad technology and bad outcomes. And so I think there's concern about that, but I think like, you know, now that there's like, you know, these two simultaneous truths that everyone seems to believe that are in contradiction with each other. You know, like one is that like everything is relative, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, all opinions are equally valid. And two, like our democracy is impossible without a shared understanding of what is true and what is false. The information that we share needs to be verified by our most trusted institutions. You know? Like people seem to simultaneously believe both of these things, and I think they're in direct contradiction with each other. So in some ways, I think most of the questions about, you know, social media in our time are about like trying to resolve those contradictions. But I think, you know, I think it's way more complicated than the way that the social media companies are trying to portray it.
Yeah, I think there's simplistic methods that they're using to handle complex realities. Like, for instance, like banning QAnon, right? This is a big one, right? Because QAnon's got these wacky theories, and then like Jesus Christ, these are weaponizing all these nutbags, and like we're just going to ban QAnon. But then, well, where do you? Because you think what they're saying is not true and not correct. But like, how far do you go with that? You've sort of set a precedent, and where does that end? Because, you know, are we going to ban JFK theories? Because JFK murders are probably still relevant today. Some of those people are still alive. Do we ban? There's theories about the Challenger, the space shuttle Challenger. There's a lot of wacky conspiracy theories about conspiracy theories about the space being fake. Have you ever seen hashtag space is fake? Yeah.
Okay.
Go on there
that's
if you
next
want
level.
If you want to really fucking just lose all faith in humanity, look up space is fake. But like, I think, oh my God, there's so many people.
Yeah, and I think that people get something out of that.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. Well, people get something out of mysteries and maybe being on the inside and knowing things where the rest of the world is asleep. This is the reason why people love the idea of red-pilled. You know, somebody even suggested I call this room the red pill. My friend Radio Raheem said, call it the red pill. I'm like, there's a lot riding on that term. Too bad, because I'm a giant fan of The Matrix. But that term has been co-opted forever. Yeah. But this idea that you're just going to ban people from discussing stupid ideas, where does that end? You know, does it end with flat Earth? Are you gonna ban that? They're gonna go, oh, they're suppressing us, and then they're gonna find these That's the thing about all these weird alternative sources of social media, whether it's Parler or Gab, they become shit fests. Sure. If you go to those, especially Gab, it's just like, God damn, what have you guys done? It's not even what have they done. It's what have the people done that have all been kicked out of all these other places. And then if you have a place that says, we're not going to kick you out, and then all these fucking cretins come piling into these places. And I'm sure there's a lot of good people on Gab. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of people that are... They just didn't want to be suppressed by social media. Parler doesn't seem to be nearly as bad. I've looked at that as well. It's more like just super right-wing information type stuff, and there's some reasonable people on Parler, but
I think that there's like a subtle thing there, because I don't know how those things work, but like I think part of what if you set aside all of the like takedown stuff, you know, all the deplatforming stuff, if you say like, okay, Facebook, Twitter, you know, these companies, like they don't do that anymore. They've never done that. You know, they're still moderating content. You know, they have an algorithm that decides like what is seen and what isn't.
Right.
You know, and in a way.
But how is that all algorithm programmed? Like, what is for Facebook? and for YouTube and a lot of these things, it's done to encourage viewership. It's done to encourage interaction, right?
It's done to encourage time spent looking at the screen.
Yeah, so that's how they monetize it. They
Yes.
want more clicks and more ad views and all that jazz. But when it becomes an ideological moderation, that's when things get a little weird, right?
But it is by definition an ideological moderation. You know, that if you optimize for time spent looking at the screen, you're going to be encouraging certain kinds of content and not others. And
Okay, but that's not always true. Like, I'll give you an example for us. We did a podcast with Kanye West.
Mm-hmm.
Kanye West was running for president, right? And if you were running for president and you were outside the norm, like for instance, Twitter banned Brett Weinstein had a Twitter account that was set up for was Unity 2020. And the idea was like, instead of looking at this in terms of left versus right, Republican versus Democrat, let's get reasonable people from both sides, like a Tulsi Gabbard and a Dan Crenshaw, bring them together and perhaps maybe put into people's minds the idea that like this concept of it has to be a Republican vice president, a Republican president. Maybe that's nonsense. And maybe it would be better if we had reasonable, intelligent people together. What is this? This is their video? Yeah. Well, it's a very rational perspective. It's not conspiracy theory driven. They got banned from Twitter. And
for what?
For nothing. Just because they were promoting a third party. Because they were trying to come up with some alternative. And the idea was this could siphon off votes from Biden. We want Biden to win because Trump is bad.
Sure, yeah.
This is the narrative, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot here. But
Well, I was going to say the Kanye, I got sidetracked. I'm sorry. Let me finish.
Yeah.
The Kanye West thing. So we had a podcast with Kanye West. It got, I don't know how many millions of views, but it was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't trending. And so, Jamie, you contacted the people at YouTube and asked them why it's trending. What was their answer?
It's not trending. It didn't meet the qualifications they decided for trending or something like that. No, it didn't include everything you would assume, like you just said, all the interactivity, comments.
Mm-hmm.
It had more comments than any video we had.
But that's what I mean.
Massive amounts of comments, massive amounts of views, but yet nowhere to be seen on the trending.
But I don't think there was a person involved. Like there was an algorithm involved that was trying to optimize for certain things.
Not in
No.
this case.
Oh,
No.
not this. You think a
This
person?
specific case, yeah. There's a team there. There's
I
separate
see.
teams at YouTube, of my understanding.
Yeah, and the separate team had made a distinction.
And I don't even know if they told the person who told me that what it was. So that person may not know either.
So they just decided this is not worthy of trending. So you have arbitrary decisions that are being made by people, most likely because they feel that ideologically Kanye West is not aligned with. I mean, he was wearing the MAGA hat for a while. It's a lot of, you know. So they just decided this is not trending, but it is trending. It's clearly trending.
Yeah.
It got
Well,
millions and millions and millions of people were watching it.
Whether there, it's like whether there are. But I think this is the point. It's like whether it's people, whether it's algorithms, there are forces that are making decisions about what people see and what people don't see,
Right.
and they're based on certain objectives that I think are most often business objectives.
But not in this case.
I mean,
This
maybe
case, the
maybe
business
not.
objective was if they
know.
wanted to get more eyeballs on it, they would want it to be trending. And people say, oh, shit,
Yeah, but it's
Kanye
just
West
like,
is on the
do
JRE.
people that like Kanye like click on ads or not? It's like, do people that it's like there's a lot in there that we don't know.
That's horseshit. Come on, bro.
I don't know. I mean, maybe
we
they're making an ideological
millions
decision.
millions and millions. When you have a video that's being viewed by that many people, there's going to be a lot of goddamn people clicking on ads, no matter what.
I mean, the other thing that these platforms want is for the content to be ad safe. It's like maybe advertisers don't. It's like I don't know. But I think actually focusing on the outlying cases of like this person was deplatformed, this person was intentionally ideologically not promoted or de-emphasized.
Well, there's shadow banning.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think that like obfuscates or draws attention away from the larger thing that's happening, which is that like those things are happening just implicitly all the time, and that like it almost like serves to the advantage of these platforms to highlight the times when they remove somebody, because what they're trying to do is reframe this as like, okay, well, yeah, we've got these algorithms or whatever. Don't talk about that. The problem is there's just these bad people, and we have to decide. There's bad content from bad people, and we have to decide, what to do about this bad content and these bad people. And I think that distracts people from the fact that like the platforms are at every moment making a decision about what you see and what you don't see. That is not as apparent,
I see what you're saying. So there's more than one problem. There's a problem of deplatforming because in many ways these deplatforming decisions are being made based on ideology. It's a certain specific ideology that the people that are deplatforming the other folks have that doesn't align with the people that are being deplatformed. These people that are being deplatformed, they have ideas that these people find offensive or they don't agree with. So they say, we're going to take you off.
Yeah. Or sometimes they just find themselves in a trap, that like...
A trap.
Well, I think that there's like... Okay, so like there's, I think, a tendency for a lot of these platforms to, try to define some policy about like what it is that they want, they don't want, And I feel like that's sort of a throwback to this like modernist view of science and how science works, and we can like objectively and rigorously define these things. And I just don't think that's actually how the world works, and that like...
How so? What do you mean? How so?
I feel like we're just past that, that it's not like, first of all, I think, science is not about truth. It's just not. It's about utility.
What do you mean?
Do you agree? Okay. It's like, I was taught Newtonian physics in high school.
Okay.
Why? It's not true. That's not how the universe works. But it's still useful, and that's why it's taught, because you can use it to predict motion outcomes, that kind of thing, right?
What's incorrect about Newtonian physics in the sense that they shouldn't be teaching it?
I mean, today, people believe that the truth is that, there's like, relativity, like gravity is not a force. There's like, these planes and stuff, whatever, that like there are other models to describe how the universe works. And Newtonian physics is considered outmoded, but it still has utility in the fact that you can use it to predict So
you're talking about in terms of quantum physics and string theory and a lot of these more...
Yeah, it's like relativity at like the large scale, quantum physics at the small scale. And even those things are most likely not true in the sense that they aren't consistent with each other, and people are trying to unify them and find something that does make sense at like both of those scales. The history of science is a history of things that weren't actually true. Bohr's model of the atom, Newtonian physics. Like, people have these... Copernicus's model of the solar system. People have these ideas of like how things work, and the reason that people are drawn to them is because they actually have utility. That it's like, oh, we can use this to predict the motion of the planets. Oh, we can use this to send a rocket into space. Oh, we can use this to, have better outcomes, for some medical procedure or whatever. But it's not actually. I think it's not actually truth. Like the point of it isn't truth. The point of it is that like we have some utility that we find in these things. And I think that, when you look at like the emergence of science and, people conceiving of it as a truth, it became this new authority that everyone was trying to appeal to. If you look at like all of the like 19th century political philosophy, I think the question of truth is like, it's even a little squishy with the hard sciences, right? But once you get into like soft sciences, like social science, psychology, like then it's even squishier, that like these things are really not about truth. They're about like some kind of utility. And when you're talking about utility, the important question is like useful for what and to whom, and I think that's just always the important question to be asking, right? Because, when you look at like all the 19th century political writing, it's all trying to frame things in terms of science in this way that it just seems laughable now. But, like at the time they were just like, we're going to prove that communism is like the most true like social economic system in the world. Like there are whole disciplines of that. People in people had like PhDs in that, their whole research departments in the Soviet Union, people doing that, and we laugh about that now, but I don't think it's that different than like social science in the West. And so I think it's like if you lose sight of that, then you try to like frame social questions in terms of truths. Like it's like this is the kind of content that we want, and we can rigorously define that, and we can define why that's going to have like the outcomes that we want it to. But once you go down that road, it's like, you're like, okay, well, terrorist stuff. We don't like terrorist stuff. So we're going to like rigorously define that. And then we have a policy, no terrorist stuff. And then, China shows up and they're like, we've got this problem with terrorists, the Uyghurs. We need, we see you have a policy. You need to, and if instead it was just like, I think if people from the beginning acknowledged that this isn't some, that all of objectivity is just a particular worldview, and that like we're not going to rigorously define these things in a way of like what is true and what isn't, then I think we would have better outcomes. But that's my weird take. I mean, I think, from the perspective of Signal, it's like, do you know what's trending on Signal right now?
No, nothing.
Neither do I.
Yeah. Okay. But it's not a social media platform. But isn't it, there's a weird thing when you decide that you have one particular ideology that's being supported and another particular ideology that is being suppressed. And this is what conservative people feel when they're on social media platforms. They're almost all of them, other than the ones we talked about before, Parler and Gab and the alternative ones, they're all very left-wing in terms of the ideology that they support, the things that can get you in trouble in Twitter, on Twitter.
You say, but then the president of the United States just constantly violated every policy that they had.
But he's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous example, right? Because he's one person, and they've actually discussed this, that he and his tweets are more important. It's more important that they allow these tweets to get out. So first of all, you can understand how fucking crazy this guy is. And second of all, it's newsworthy. He's the leader of the
and also it would be very costly from a business perspective if
very likely, and kind of amazing that he didn't do anything along the way while he was witnessing people get deplatformed, and particularly this sort of bias towards people on the left, and this discrimination against people on the right. There's people on the right that have been banned and shadow banned and blocked from posting things, and you run into this situation where you wonder what exactly is a social media platform when it's just a small private company, and maybe you have some sort of a video platform, and there's only a few thousand people on it, and you only want videos that align with your perspective. Okay, you're a private company, you can do whatever you want. But when you're the biggest video platform on earth, like YouTube, and you decide that you are going to take down anything that disagrees with your perspective on how COVID should be handled, including doctors. Like, this is one of the things that happened. Doctors that were stating, like, there's more danger in lockdowns. There's more danger in this than there is in the way we're handling it. There's more danger in the negative aspects of the decisions that are being made than it would be to let people go to work with masks on. There's more, and then those videos just get deleted. Those videos get blocked. There's people that are opposed to current strategies with all sorts of different things, and those videos get blocked. So there's an ideological basis in censorship, and so you have to make a decision, like, what are these platforms? Are these platforms simply just a private company, or is it a town hall? Is it the way that people get to express ideas? And isn't the best way to express ideas to allow people to decide based on the better argument what is correct and what's incorrect? Like, this is what freedom of speech is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about, you have an idea, I have an idea, these two ideas come together, and then the observers get to go, okay, well, this guy's got a lot of facts behind him. This is objective reality. This is provable, and this other guy is just a crazy person who thinks the world's hollow. Okay, this is the correct one. There's going to be some people that go, no, there's a suppression of hollow earth, and hollow earth is the truth, and hollow earth facts, and hollow earth theory. But you got to kind of let that happen. You got to kind of have people that are crazy. You got to kind of remember the old dude that used to stand on the corners with the placards on, the world is ending tomorrow. Like,
they're still there.
Yeah, but those are on Twitter now. Right? Yeah. But those people, no one said you got to get rid of that guy. You would drive by and go, look at this crazy fuck. Those crazy fucks making YouTube videos, those videos get deleted. I don't know if that's good. I kind of think that you should let those crazy fucks do that because it's not going to influence you. It's not going to influence me. It's going to influence people that are easily influenced. And the question is, who are we protecting and why are we protecting these people?
Well, okay, but I think in my mind what's going on is like the problem is that it used to be that some person with very strange ideas about the world wearing a sign on the street corner shouting was just a person with very strange ideas about the world wearing a sign on the street corner shouting. Now there's somebody, with very strange ideas about the world, and those ideas are being amplified by a $1 billion company because there are algorithms that amplify that. And what I'm saying is that instead of actually talking about that, instead of addressing that problem, those companies are trying to distract us from that discussion by saying we're just going to remove that person's content.
Okay.
Oh, it's like, oh yeah, amplifying that was probably a bad idea. We're going to remove their content instead of looking at how to change the algorithm so that we're not amplifying things that ultimately don't serve as well.
Would the correct way to handle it would it be to make algorithms illegal in that respect, like to not be able to amplify or detract, to not be able to ban, shadow ban, or just to have whatever trends trend, whatever is popular, whatever people like, let them like it. And say, listen, this thing that you've done by creating an algorithm that encourages people to interact on Facebook, encourages people to spend more time on the computer, what you've done is you've kind of distorted what is valuable to people. You've changed it and guided it in a way that is ultimately, perhaps arguably, detrimental to society. So we are going to ban algorithms. You cannot use algorithms to dictate what people see or not see. You give them a fucking search bar, and if they want to look up UFOs, let them look up UFOs. But don't shove it down their throat because you know they're a UFO nut. Don't curate their content feed.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's okay. It's complicated because, one, I have no faith in, like when you say ban or make it illegal or whatever, I have zero faith in like the government being able to handle this.
It's like, nor do I.
Every time I see like a cookie warning on a website, I'm like, okay, these people are not the people that this is what they've given us after all this time. It's like these people are not going to solve this for us. And also, I think a lot of what it is that the dissatisfaction that people feel and the discomfort that people feel and the concern that people have is a concern about power. That right now these tech companies have a lot of power, and I think that the concern that is coming from government is like the concern for their power. That like the right has made such a big deal about deplatforming, and I think it's because what they're trying to put these companies on notice. That it's like, if you fuck with us, like we will take power. But
they've done nothing about it. Don't you think that they've actually made a big deal about deplatforming because the right has been disproportionately deplatformed?
I think the right is like doing fine.
How so?
Social media. I don't know. I don't know what the numbers are, but I feel like it's like the
Would
fact
you say that
Trump,
though because you're on the left?
Trump was still on.
Yeah,
no,
but that's
I'm not,
Trump. That's Trump. He's an anomaly. You can't really,
I guess maybe let me just reframe this to say that like I think it's interesting that we've hit an inflection point, right? Where like the era of utopianism with regards to technology is over.
Yeah.
That it's just like, after 2016, it was just like big tech has zero allies anymore. On the left, everyone's just like, you just gave the election to Trump, and on the right, they're just like, you just removed somebody from YouTube for calling gay people an abomination. Fuck you. Like they have no allies. No one believes in the better and brighter. No one believes that Google is organizing the world's information. No one believes that Facebook is connecting the world.
No.
And I think that is there's an opportunity there. That like we're in a better situation than we were before. All the cards are on the table. Under like people more and more understanding how it is that these systems function. I think we'll increasingly see that people understand that this is really about power. It's about authority, and that like we should be trying to build things that limit the power that people have.
If you had your wish, if you could let these social media platforms, whether it's video platforms like YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, if if you had the call, if they called you up and said, Moxie, we're going to let you make the call. What should we do? How should we curate this information? Should we have algorithms? Should we allow people? Should we just let it open to everything? Everything and anybody? What should we do?
Well, I mean, this is what we're trying to do with Signal. It's like...
But it's different, right?
Well,
Because you're just a messaging app.
We're just a messaging app, but...
No, I don't say that. It's a very good messaging app that I use.
No, I understand what you're saying. But I think, the way that messaging apps are going, there's like a trajectory where a project like Signal becomes more of a social experience. And that like the things that we're building extend beyond just like, sending messages. Particularly, I think as more and more communication moves into group chats and things like that. And the foundation that we're building it on is a foundation where we know nothing. It's like if I looked up your Signal account record right now of like all the information that we had about you on Signal, there's only two pieces of information, the date that you created the account and the date that you last used Signal. That's it. That's all we know. If you looked on any other platform, it would be, your mind would be blown.
No, it's admirable what you're doing. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you.
But so I think that foundation gives us, it's like now that we have that foundation, there's a lot that we can build on it, right? And
would you do a social media app?
Well, I think, some of the stuff that we're working on now of just like moving away from phone numbers so that you can have like, a username so that you can like post that more publicly. And then, we have groups. Now you have group links and then, maybe we can do something with events and we can, that's like, we're sort of moving in the direction of like an app that's good for communicating with connections you already have to an app that's also good for creating new connections.
Would you think that social media would be better served with the algorithms that are in place and with the mechanisms for determining what's trending in place and for their trust and safety or whatever their content monitoring policy they have now, or have it wide open? Wild West.
I mean, I think it depends on when you say like better, better for what, right?
Better for humanity.
I think
censorship is better?
No. I think I think bad business models create bad technology, which has bad outcomes. That's the problem we have today, right?
So the problem is that there's a financial incentive for them to...
Yeah. That if we, if you look at like the metrics, that we've talked about, like, what Facebook cares about is just like time that you spent looking at the screen on Facebook,
right.
Like if we were to have metrics, if Signal were to have metrics, our metrics would be like, what we want is for you to use the app as little as possible, for you to actually have the app open as little as possible, but for the velocity of information to be as high as possible. So it's like you're getting maximum utility. You're spending as little time possible looking at this thing while getting as much out of it as you can.
How could that be engineered, do you think?
That's what we're trying to do.
So you're trying to do that with a social media app as well?
Well, I mean, we're sort of moving in that direction, right? And it's like, and I think once you start from the principle of like, well, we don't have to have infinite growth. We don't actually have to have profit. We don't have to return. We're not accountable to investors. We don't have to, satisfy public markets. We also don't have to build a pyramid scheme where we have like, 2 billion users so that we can monetize them to like, a few 100,000 advertisers so that we can,
right.
Like we don't have to do any of that. And so we have the freedom to like pick the metrics that we think are the ways that we think technology should work, that we think will better serve all of us.
So what would better be served is a bunch of wild hippies like yourself that don't want to make any money at all.
I mean, you
put together a social media.
If you work at Signal, you get paid.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. But I don't mean
yeah.
the company itself.
Yeah.
As a corporation, you get paid, but that's it.
Yeah, I mean,
how do you generate the income?
Well, we do it by like tying ourselves to a community of users instead of advertisers, right?
So
it's like,
where's the money coming from though?
From people who use Signal. So similar to like.
Do they pay for it?
No, it's like donation based. So similar to like Wikimedia.
Oh, okay.
It's like
Okay.
Wikipedia exists. There's no company. There's no.
Well, that would be great if they could figure out a way to develop some sort of a social media platform that just operated on donations and could rival the ones that are operating on advertising revenue. Because I agree with you that creates a giant problem.
And that's what we're working on slowly.
Do you think that so you just look at it in terms of bad business model equals bad outcome? That's how you look at all these, and you don't.
And it's also, by the way, why we have people mining cobalt in
Yes.
Congo. You know?
Yeah. And you don't think that they can regulate their way out of this situation?
With technology, I'm not super optimistic. Yeah, just based on, you know, and even the hearings, you know, it's just like.
So do you
hour.
think that, yes, the hearings were amateur hour. Yeah. When, there was some ridiculous questions.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like they're
Yeah.
talking to the wrong people. They don't understand how stuff
They don't
works.
know
you know, it's
that's
just like,
not Google,
you've been
that's
prepped
Apple.
for this. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, don't you have a team of people who?
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. It's fascinating to watch, right? It's like your dad who doesn't know how do I get the email?
It's like these people are not going to save us, man. You know, and it's like
No.
anything that they do will probably just make things worse.
Do you think that it's a valid argument that conservatives have, though, that they're being censored and that their voice is not being heard? I know what you said in terms of, you know, that if someone had something on YouTube that said that gay people are unhuman and they should be abolished and banned and delete that video, I get that perspective. But I think there's other perspectives like the Unity 2020 perspective, which is not in any way
Yeah, I mean,
negative.
I don't know what
or-
happened with that, but I feel like what I think it could be a part of this thing of just like, well, we create this policy and we have these, you know, we define things this way, and then a lot of stuff just gets caught up in it, you know, where it's just like now you're like taking down content about the Uyghurs because you wanted to do something else, you know, that if people would just be more honest about like there is not really an objectivity and, you know, we're looking for these specific outcomes and this is why, that I think, you know, maybe we would have better results. But
Well, how does one fix this, though? How does one, like, you worked at Twitter, you kind of understand these better than most, these social media platforms. How would one fix this? If they hired you, if they said, hey, Moxie, we're kind of fucked. We don't know how to fix this.
well,
Is there a way? Because it seems like they make so much money.
Yeah.
If you came along and said, yeah, well, you got to stop making money. They'd be like, get rid of that fucking nut.
Exactly.
Look at him.
Yeah.
Goddamn sailor.
Yeah.
What's he talking about?
What is he talking about?
Fuck out of here. Stop making money.
Yeah.
Well, you want to play rock, paper, scissors? They would go, you're crazy, man. How do you
Well,
fix this?
I mean, one thing I'm actually a little encouraged by is like the organizing unionization stuff that's been happening in the tech industry. So there's been a couple of walkouts, and there's some increased communication among tech workers. Normally, you think about.
I'm not totally aware of this. Like, what have they been organizing and unionization about?
Well, normally you think about unionization as like a process for improving material conditions for workers, you know. And there's some aspect of this in the organizing that's been happening.
Where have they been doing this?
Google is the big where a lot of the activity has happened, but it's happening across the industry. And
What are their objectives at Google?
at Google, there were some walkouts. The objectives. You should talk to Meredith Whitaker about this. Actually, she's really smart and has a lot to say.
Shout out to Meredith.
Yeah, she and other people, you know, were working there, and they were organizing for like one, trying to apply the protections that full-time workers and benefits of full-time workers there had to a lot of the temporary workers, like the people who work in security, the people who are working in the cafeteria, the people who are working, you know, driving buses and stuff like that, who are living a lot more precariously, but also for creative control over how the technology that they're producing is used. So Google was involved in some like military contracts that were pretty
Sketch. Yeah.
like applying machine learning AI stuff to military technology. And then finally, there had been a lot of high-profile sexual harassment incidents at Google where the perpetrators of sexual harassment were usually paid large severances in order to leave. And so they had a list of demands, and they like a lot of people walked out. I don't know what the numbers were, but a lot of people, they managed to organize internally and walked out. And I think stuff like that is encouraging because you know, it's like we look at the hearings and it's like the people in Congress don't even know who's the right person to talk to. You know, it's like, you know, old people talking about technology they don't understand. The people who really do understand technology are the people who are working in these companies. And a lot of times they don't feel good about the way that what they're creating is being applied, or how how what they're creating is being applied. And
But isn't that another issue where you're going to have people who have an ideological perspective and that may be opposed to people that have a different ideological perspective, but they're sort of disproportionately represented on the left in these social media corporations? When you get kids that come out of school, they have degrees in tech or they're interested in tech, they tend to almost universally lean left.
maybe, but I think most, like when it comes to the technology, I don't think people are. I think, what almost everyone can agree is like the amount of money and resources that we're putting into surveillance, into ad tech, into these algorithms that are just about increasing engagement, that they're just not good for the world. And if you
Agreed.
put a different CEO in charge, that person's just going to get fired.
Right.
But if the entire company organizes together and says, no, this is what we want, this is how we want to allocate resources, this is how we want to create the world, then you can't fire all those people.
I understand what you're
way
saying. So
harder
they'd
to-
have to get together and unionize and have like a very distinct mandate, like very clear that this is what we want to use this. We want to go back to do no evil or whatever the fuck it used to be.
Right.
Yeah, where they don't really have that as a big sign anymore. Do you think that would really have an impact, though? I mean, it seems like the amount of money, when you find out the amount of money that's being generated by Google and Facebook and YouTube and all, it's the numbers are so staggering that to shut that valve off, to shut that spout, good luck. It's almost like it had to have been engineered from the beginning, like what you're doing at Signal. Like someone had to look at it from the beginning and go, you know what? If we rely on advertiser revenue, we're going to have a real problem.
Yeah. And I think it's, yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you're right. And there's part of the problem with just relying on tech workers to organize themselves is that they are shareholders of these companies.
Right.
They have a financial stake in their outcome. And so that influences the way that they think about things. But, I think another aspect to all of this is that I think people underestimate just how expensive it is to make software. And another thing that I think would really improve things is making software cheaper. Right now it's moving in the opposite direction. It's getting harder, more expensive to produce software. And
How so?
it used to be that if you wrote a piece of software, you just wrote it once, for the computer, and then that was your software. Now if you want to write a piece of software, you have to write it at least 3 times. You have to write it for iPhone, you have to write it for Android, you have to write it for the web. Maybe you need a desktop client. So it's like you need 3 or 4 times the energy that you used to have. And the way that software works, not worth going into. But it's getting more expensive. And it's
What do you
staggering.
personally use? Are you one of those minimalist dudes? I notice you have like a little tiny notebook here,
Oh yeah.
and then you have 2 phones.
Yeah, I'm like, I have to have. I try to be like, I just want to.
You're also one of those renegades with no phone case.
Oh yeah, man. I feel like that's like.
You and Jamie should get together and talk about it. He's radical.
I mean, it's like people. It's like industrial designers put all of that effort into creating
it's
that thing, and
made
then
out
you
of
just
fucking
wrap a weird
glass,
thing
and it
around
costs
it.
$1,000. If you drop it with this thing on it, it doesn't get hurt. And see this little thing right here? See, I stick my finger in there, and then I can use it. I can text better.
Really
See?
got it. Yeah.
And then also, if I want to watch a video, that'll prop it up. Ta-da! You know how that works? Ta-da! Isn't that better?
Yeah.
Isn't that better than no case?
I mean, some things I actually want to make more difficult for myself. But I have 2 phones just because I always just want to keep tabs on how everything works everywhere.
So you have an Android and an
an
iPhone.
yeah.
Do you keep things stripped down?
No, I don't actually use.
TikTok.
Well, okay, my problem is that like I spend all day. I think, sometimes I go through this thing where like cryptography will be like in the news or something. There'll be some like geopolitical thing that's happening, and someone like Vice or something will get in touch with me, and they'll be like, hey, we want to do a thing like a video where like we follow you around for a day, like a day in the life. It's because it's so exciting.
Sounds
like,
good for
cryptography or
them.
whatever,
Annoying for you.
Well, the thing I'll usually write back is like, okay, here's the video. Me sitting in front of a computer for 8 hours. And they're like, oh, we can't make that video. like no one would want to watch that, you know?
Yeah, what you need to do is take you to a yoga class, then you go to an organic food store, and you talk to people about their rights, and then
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
That's what they
but it's
want.
like, unfortunately, I don't even want to watch the movie of my own life, you know?
yeah,
But so that is my life. So it's like, I spend so much time, like, looking at a computer for work that it's hard for me to continue like looking at screens and stuff. outside
yeah.
of
I
that.
can only imagine. Yeah,
But I try to be like a normal, there's this like in the history of people who are like building cryptography, stuff like that. There was this period of time where the thesis was basically like, all right, what we're going to do is develop really powerful tools for ourselves, and then we're going to teach everyone to be like us, and that didn't work because, we didn't really anticipate the way that computers were going. So I try to be like as normal as possible. I just like have like a normal setup. I'm not like, I haven't, I used to have a cell phone where I'd like, soldered the microphone differently. So there was like a hard switch that you could turn it off, whatever. It's like, I
really,
don't do
you
any
did
of
that?
anymore. Yeah, because it's like, whatever. You start thinking about like how all this stuff works.
Do you ever fuck around with like Linux phones or anything like that?
No. I try to be like normal,
Okay.
Yeah. I still do run Linux on a desktop just because I've been doing that forever. But
And you keep a moleskin for what?
just notes, and
You don't put them on your phone?
sometimes I do, but so I like writing more, I guess.
Oh, okay, so you just do it just because you enjoy it.
Yeah, but I guess, you're right. Maybe, like I feel the forces of darkness are not going to compromise that.
Yeah. Do you feel like you have extra scrutiny on you because of the fact that you're involved in this messaging application that Glenn Greenwald and Edward Snowden and a bunch of other people that are seriously concerned with security and privacy, that maybe people are upset at you that you've created something that allows people to share encrypted messages?
I mean, maybe. I mean, I think
'Cause you've kind of cut out the middleman, right? You've cut out the third party door.
Yeah. And I think, but so in some ways that means that there's less pressure on me because, it's like if you're the creator of Facebook Messenger and your computer gets hacked, like that's everyone's Facebook messages are, gone. And, for me, if like my computer gets hacked, I can't access anyone's Signal messages, whether I get hacked or not,
Right.
And so I have sort of less liability in that sense. There was like a weird period of time where it was very difficult for me to fly commercially, like on a airplane. And I don't know why. I think it had something to do with a talk that someone gave about WikiLeaks once, and they mentioned my name. And after
You were
that,
getting flagged.
yeah, it was very annoying. I would like go to the airport, and I wouldn't be able to print a ticket at the kiosk. I had to go talk to a person. They had to call some phone number that would appear on their screen, and then wait on hold for like 45 minutes to an hour
Jesus
to get
Christ.
approval, and then they would get approval to print the ticket.
So you had to anticipate this when you traveled?
Yeah.
So you had to go there way in advance.
Way in advance. And then anytime I traveled internationally, on the way back through customs, they would seize all of the electronics that I had and confiscate them. Yeah.
The U.S. government would do this?
Yeah, Customs and Border Protection.
They would seize your shit, and would you get it back?
They would eventually send it back, but you just had to throw it out because it's not. Who knows what they did to it?
How I would want to give it to someone and go, "Hey, tell me what they did."
Yeah.
Could you do that? Is it possible
Yeah.
to back engineer whatever?
I never spent time on it.
How much time did they have your shit for?
It would be like weeks.
Weeks.
Yeah.
Weeks. Did you have to give them passwords and everything?
Well, that's the thing. They would stop you and they would be like, "Hey, we just need you to type in your password here so that we can get through the full disk encryption." And I would be like, "No." And they would be like, "Well, if you don't do that, we're going to take this and we're going to send it to our lab, and they're going to get it anyway." And I would be like, "No, they're not." And they would be like, "All right, we're going to take it. You're not going to have your stuff for a while. You sure you don't want to type your password?" I'd be like, "Nope." And then, it would disappear and it'd come back weeks later. And then it's like,
How bizarre.
yeah.
And there was no, I mean, they didn't have like a motive. There was no.
That's the thing. You never know why. Why?
No, but I'm saying they didn't say, "Hey, you're thought to have done this," or there's some.
No, they would always just be like, "Oh, no, this is just random or whatever." But there would be two people at the exit of the plane with photographs of me, waiting for me to step off the plane, and then they would escort. They wouldn't even wait for me to get to the.
So did you have to have like a burner laptop?
I just wouldn't travel with electronics, because it was just.
Even your phone?
Yeah, even my phone.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
if that was only internationally though, because they can't do that domestically. But
So
yeah.
domestically, you just had long waits, and then they'd eventually give you a ticket?
Yeah, they would eventually give you a ticket, and then you get the selective screening where they would take all the stuff out of your bag and
Yeah,
feel through
and
your car.
they'd
And
touch
then
your dick too,
and
right?
then at every connection, the TSA would come to the gate of the connecting thing, even though you're already behind security, and do it again at the connection.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. It was weird. It was just like a
Connections too.
yeah.
So they're trying to fuck with you.
I think so. Yeah, I don't know what that.
And
was
how
about.
long did that last for?
That was a couple years. Yeah.
And when did it go away? The day it went away, were you like, oh?
Yep. Yeah. One day it just stopped.
Oh.
It really did change the game.
What year did it go away? When Trump got into office?
No, it was way before that. Yeah, I forget. I forget. Yeah, I was thinking on the way here. It's funny how I remember after the last election, everyone was talking about California leaving the United States, California seceding. You remember that?
Yeah,
Cal-Exit and all that
hilarious.
stuff,
Yeah.
And now everyone's talking about leaving California, after this election.
Yeah. Well, imagine that. President Newsom
Yeah.
locked down in a communist state.
But do you remember people discovered that the whole Cal-Exit movement was started by a guy that lived in Russia?
Oh, it was one of those IRA things, Internet Research Agency scams.
But it wasn't. I actually tracked
Wasn't?
the guy down in Moscow one time.
You tracked him down.
He was just some guy. Well, because
Did he do it for goof?
No, he really believes
That California should leave?
Yeah, he lived in California and had been for years trying to foment this Cal-Exit thing, and he has all the stats on why it would be better for California and all this stuff, and then he sort of thought, well, this isn't working, and he really liked Russia for some reason, so he moved to Russia just before the election, not knowing what was going to happen. And then when Trump won, people were like, wait a second, fuck this. Maybe California should get out of here. And they just found this, campaign that already existed. And everyone sort of got behind it. And he was just like, oh, shit. And he lives in Russia now, But he, didn't really understand optics, I think, where the way that everyone found out that he lived in Russia was that he opened a California embassy in Moscow. So they announced Cal-Exit has opened the first California embassy in a foreign country, but it was in Moscow, and this was right as all the Russian stuff was happening, Yeah.
So if you're conspiratorially minded, you'd have drawn some incorrect conclusions.
Yeah, he was just. I met with him. I hung out with him for a day. I think he really genuinely just.
So what was your motivation to hang out with this guy for a whole day?
I mean, I was just fascinated, because here's this guy who's doing this kind of ambitious thing, and it just the optics seems so bad,
Yeah.
But I think he reminded me of that Hannah Arendt quote that's if the essence of power is deceit, does that mean that the essence of impotence is truth? That he sort of believed that just the facts were enough. It's just the stats of just we spend this much money on defense spending. If we if we stopped, it's we would have
so much money.
Yeah,
if California was a country,
and we would still have the fourth largest military in the world, and we would have it's just the numbers actually are compelling, and he was just sort of that's people will just see the truth, and I was like, dude, I think maybe you should not live in Russia anymore, it was, dude, yeah.
Why did he go to Russia?
He had been teaching English, and I think he just sort of ended up liking Russia. And so, yeah, he just decided to move there. And I was on the way with a friend to Abkhazia. Have you ever heard of that place?
No.
It's an autonomous region of the country of Georgia. And it's kind of interesting. There's all these autonomous regions in the world that are essentially their own countries, but they're not recognized by the UN or other countries, But
Texas. You're in one right now.
I mean, these places are militarized border, they have their own,
Right. But they're not recognized by the UN.
Yeah. And so they all recognize each other. And it's if you want to be a country, it's kind of interesting. You need a lot of stuff, You need a flag, you need a national bird, you need an anthem, whatever. And you need a soccer team. You definitely have to have a soccer team,
Interesting.
So these countries all have their own soccer teams, but they can't play in FIFA because they're not recognized by the UN. So FIFA can't recognize them. So they have their own league. It's the League of Unrecognized States and Stateless Peoples. And they have their own World Cup. And they have the World Cup in Abkhazia.
How many different countries are there that are like this?
There are a lot.
How many?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know how many teams are in this league called CONIFA. I mean, it's 20 plus.
So there's 20 plus unrecognized countries or autonomous regions.
And also stateless peoples. So like the Kurds, there's people from Chagos Islands were basically evicted for a U.S. military base, and they're a diaspora. There's places like Somaliland, Transnistria, South Ossetia, Laplandia. It's kind of interesting. So I went with a friend to Abkhazia for the World Cup of all the unrecognized states.
How was that?
It was awesome.
Yeah?
It was really interesting. I mean,
The smile on your face. This is the biggest smile you've had the entire show. It sounds like it was a great time.
I mean, it just is so fascinating to me. And I think it's like an interesting, it's like in a way that I feel like, society moves by like pushing at the edges, that like it's the fringes that end up moving the center.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, looking at the margins of the way politics works is an interesting view of like how everything else works, that like going to Abkhazia, it was so crazy getting there. It's like, we travel all through Russia. We get to this like militarized border. You go through these 3 checkpoints that aren't supposed to exist, but obviously exist. You get to the other side and it's just the same as where you just were. You're like, you guys fought a brutal civil war, with like genocide, like full on, like crazy shit. And it's just kind of the same, like, was it worth it? Like, what's the deal, And I feel like it's this thing you see again and again of like the institutions that we're familiar with in the world that exists are like the institutions of kings, It's like, police, military, illegal apparatus, tax collectors, and that like every moment in history since then has been about trying to like change ownership of those institutions. And it's always sort of dissatisfying, and like, just seeing that happen again and again and just like, realizing that it's like maybe what we should be doing is actually trying to get rid of these institutions or change these institutions in some way.
Don't you think there's a very slow rate of progress, but ultimately progress? Like if you follow Pinker's work, it looks at all the various metrics like murder, rape, racism, crime, all these different things. It's over time. We're clearly moving in a better direction.
Maybe. I mean, and
do you think it's just like, I was listening to this podcast today. We were talking about religion, and it was discussing the Bible, and they were talking about all the different stories that are in the Bible, that many of them that are hundreds of years apart, that were collected and put into that. Just stop and think about a book that was written literally before the Constitution was drafted. And that book is being introduced today as gospel. And that there's a new book that's going to be written 200 years from now, and that will be attached to the new version of the Bible as well. And then one day someone will come across this, and it will all be interpreted as the will and the words of God that all came about in one particular era. It like all came down from God. But now we know that these things have like you're dealing with giant spans of time.
Yeah.
But today, these spans of time are far slower. Like going from Alan Turing in 1950 being chemically castrated for being gay to, in my lifetime, seeing gay marriage as being something that was very fringe when I was a boy living in San Francisco, to universal across the United States today, at least mostly accepted by the populace, right? That this is a very short amount of time where a big change has happened, and that these changes are coming quicker and quicker and quicker. I would hope that this is a trend that is moving in the correct direction.
Yeah, certainly there are some things that are getting better, yeah. And I feel like, to me, it's important to, for a lot of those things, like the things you mentioned, like gay marriage, I think it's important to realize that like a lot of that progress would not have happened without the ability to break the law, honestly.
Right.
That like how would anyone have known that like we wanted to allow same-sex marriage if no one had been able to have a same-sex relationship because sodomy laws had been perfectly enforced,
Yeah.
How would we know that we want to legalize marijuana if like no one had ever been able to consume marijuana?
Right.
And
right. Yeah.
So I think, a lot of the fear around like increased surveillance state or whatever is that like that space dissipates.
Yes. Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's like we're living in the apocalypse. That it's like if you took someone from 200 years ago who used to be able to just walk up to the Klamath River and dump a bucket in the water and pull out 12 salmon, and that was their food, and you were like, oh yeah, the way it works today is you go to Whole Foods and it's $20 a pound and it's pretty good. They'd be like, what have you done? Oh my God, you used to be able to walk across the backs of the salmon, across the whole river.
Well, we're trying to avoid slipping even further into that apocalypse. I don't know if you've followed what's going on in the Bristol Bay of Alaska with the Pebble Mine.
No.
Oh, it's crazy. They're trying, and according to what Joe Biden said when he was running for office, that when he's in office, that will not happen. But they're trying to do essentially the biggest mine in the world that would destroy the salmon population. It would destroy it. It would literally wipe out a gigantic, not just a gigantic industry, but a gigantic chunk of the salmon. I think it's, I forget which kind of salmon it is. I don't want to say it's Chinook. I forget what kind of salmon it is, but it's the biggest population. Sockeye, thank you. The biggest population of them certainly in America, but I think in the world. I think it's responsible for an enormous number of jobs and an enormous... And apparently there's fucking billions of dollars worth of gold and copper down there.
Yeah.
Earthworks, what's at stake? An average of 40 to 50 million wild salmon make the epic migration from the ocean to the headwaters of the Bristol Bay every year, like no place on Earth. The Bristol Bay watershed. They've been working to try to make this mine a reality for, I think, a couple of decades now. And people have been fighting tirelessly to educate people on what a devastating impact this is going to have on the ecology of that area and the fact that the environment will be permanently devastated. There's no way of bringing this back, and that there's no way of doing this without destroying the environment, because the specific style of mining that they have to employ in order to pull that copper and gold out of the ground involves going deep into the earth to find these reservoirs of gold and copper, and there's sulfur they have to go through, and then they have to remove the waste. And mining companies have invested hundreds of millions of dollars in this and then abandoned it. So they were like, we can't fucking do this. And then people are like, we can do it. And then and it's other companies that I don't believe the company that's currently involved in it is even an American company. I think it's a foreign company that's trying to. I think they're from Canada that are trying to do this spectacular.
Barrick Gold, maybe.
I don't know which company it is, but it's my friend Steve Ranella from the Meat Eater podcast. I want to recommend this podcast because he's got a particular episode on that where he talks about it. Let me find it real quick because it's pretty epic, where he talks to this one guy who's dedicated the last 20 years of his life trying to fight this. Let me just find it real quick because it's pretty intense, and it's terrifying when you see how close it's come to actually being implemented, and how if it happens, there's no way you pull that back. Like once they do it,
it's like all that Standing Rock shit, where they were like, no, the pipeline's gonna be fine, no way that it leaks into the water or whatever, It's like, sure enough.
Exactly. Unfortunately, I'm already listened to it, so I'm having a hard time finding it in this app. It's motherfuckers.
I was looking on their website to try to get it.
Did you find it?
They have a bunch of articles about it.
Here, previously played. A Half-Life of Never. It's the October 5th episode.
That's a good title.
Yeah, and the gentleman's name is Tim Bristol, which is kind of crazy. Just that is his birth name. His name is Tim Bristol, and he's dealing with this Bristol Bay situation. I mean, it's just a random coincidence.
And you read all that shit about the
episode 241.
Like when they were building all the dams, in California, and it's just like the salmon just bashed themselves to death. Basically, they had to set them on fire.
Seattle,
so many of them.
Same thing that happened up in Seattle. These knuckleheads, they didn't understand the migration. These salmon won't go anywhere else. They have one specific river where they were born, and that's where they will die and spawn. Oh, it's crazy. But these assholes that just want copper and gold are willing to do this. And there was this one politician in particular that has a gigantic windfall if he can pull this off, or lobbyist or whatever the fuck he is. But he stands to make, I think they said $14 million if he can actually get the shovels into the ground. That's how much he earns.
So what are we going to do about it?
Kill that guy.
Assassination politics.
Yes. Kill them all. No. I'm kidding. Don't get me in trouble. You can get banned off of YouTube for saying something like that. I'm joking. What do we do? We should make people aware of it and make people aware that this is that there are real consequences to allowing politicians to make decisions that will literally affect human beings for the rest of eternity. Because you will never have that population of salmon coming to that particular location that have been going there for millions and millions of years. And the reason why you won't have them there is because someone is greedy. It's really that simple. I mean, we are getting along fine without that copper and without that gold, and we are using the resource of the salmon, and people are employed that are enjoying that resource, and they're also able to go there and see the bears eating the salmon and seeing this incredible wild place. Alaska is one of the few really, truly wild spots in this country.
Yeah.
And someone might fuck that up. And if you get enough greedy assholes together and they can figure out a way to make this a reality, and with the wrong people in positions of power, that's 100% possible.
Yeah. Yeah, you might even say we've organized the entire world economy to fuck that up.
Yeah.
But I think that it's like the question of agency of like, how do we affect these processes is like tough.
Well, I was joking obviously about killing that person, but there was a recent one of the Iranian scientists was assassinated, and this brought up this gigantic ethical debate. And we don't know who did it, whether it was Israeli army.
Mossad held a press conference to say we didn't do it while wearing T-shirts that said we definitely did it.
Assassinated Iranian nuclear scientist shot with remote-controlled machine gun. Holy fuck. Holy fuck.
Daylight, which is what I was hearing about.
Oh, my God. Dude, we're killing people with robots now, right? That was the other Iranian guy that got killed, Soleimani, who was also killed with a drone. I mean, essentially.
This is out of another car, but whatever.
Oh, so a car was driving by and there was a remote-controlled machine gun? Mm-hmm. Fuck.
It says he was in a bulletproof car, too. Wow, I don't know.
He was in a bulletproof, like they knew they were going to kill this guy.
What do you do, man? Damn.
So this is the question.
Oh, he got out of the car.
Oh.
Fucked up.
Well, there you go. You fucked up. Just stay in that bulletproof car. If you know that a man is going to, like, what if someone did that to Oppenheimer? What if someone said, hey, we see where this is going, and we need to find that Oppenheimer gentleman, and we need to prevent Big Boy from dropping down and killing how many people? Like, 500,000 people. What?
He got shot by that remote. It was 164 yards away. Shot him and his bodyguard, and then the car they were in exploded. Lasted for 3 minutes. Like the whole thing was 3 minutes long.
Wow. So there's this ethical dilemma. Like, if someone is actively trying to acquire nuclear weapons, and we think that those people are going to use those nuclear weapons, is it ethical to kill that person? And if that person's a scientist, they're not a...
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, I think the causality stuff is really hard to figure out, But I think most of the time it's not about the one person, that it's not, maybe sometimes it is, but I think it's just like, I feel like assassination politics in the tech arena does not work, that it's like you can get rid of all the people at the top of these companies, and that's not what's going to do it, that there are like these structural reasons why these things keep happening over and over again.
Yeah, I think they're trying to slow it down, though, right? Like, this is the reason why. Do you remember when they employed Stuxnet? Stuxnet?
Yeah.
I mean, that was for the same reason, right? They were trying to disarm the Iranian nuclear capabilities.
Yeah. That was the same thing where they...
But that was kind of crazy.
We didn't do it while wearing T-shirts. They were like, we definitely did this.
But they did that with computer virus, right? Which is pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
And people didn't have a problem with that. They're like, well, that's
Well, I think some people had a problem with that, obviously, but
Iranians.
yeah, but also just like, okay, you go down that road and where things can happen too. A great example is so one of the things that came out in a lot of the documents that Snowden released was that the NSA had worked with a standards body called NIST in order to produce a random number generator that was backdoored. So random numbers are very important in cryptography, and if you can predict what the random numbers are going to be, then you win. And so the NSA had produced this random number generator that allowed them to predict what the random numbers would be, because they knew of this one constant that was in there. They knew a reciprocal value that you can't derive just by looking at it, but they know because they created it. And they had what they called a nobody but us backdoor, nobody but us backdoor. And they got NIST to standardize this thing, and then they got a company called Jupiter, who makes routers and VPNs and stuff like that. Juniper, sorry, to include this in their products. And so the idea was that like the NSA would have these capabilities. They had developed, these vulnerabilities that they could exploit in situations like this. That they could like take advantage of foreign powers and stuff like that in ways that wouldn't boomerang back at them. But what happened was, in I think early teens, Juniper got hacked, and somebody secretly changed that one parameter that was like basically the back door to a different one that they knew the reciprocal value to, and it's most likely China or Russia that did this. Then what's kind of interesting is there's a big incident where the OPM, the Office of Personnel Management, I think, was compromised, and they have records on, foreign intelligence assets and stuff like that. Their systems were compromised, it seems like maybe by China. And what's sort of interesting is that they were running the Juniper networking gear that had been hacked in this one specific way. And so it's kind of possible that the NSA developed this backdoor that they were going to use for situations like this, against foreign adversaries or whatever, and that the whole thing just boomeranged back at them, and the Office of OPM was compromised as a result.
Wow.
But and this is like, I don't know. I think it's, it's easy to look at things like Stuxnet and stuff like that and just be like, yeah, this is harm reduction or whatever, but in the end, it can have real world consequences. And this is also why people are so hesitant about, the government is always like, well, why don't you develop a form of cryptography where it works except for us, we can access the content,
Yeah.
And it's like, well, this is why, because if you can access it, if anybody can access it, somehow that's going to boomerang back at you.
Well, I remember when there was a terrorist attack in Bakersfield, California. Is that where it was? I think it was Bakersfield.
Yeah.
Where?
San Bernardino.
San Bernardino,
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And there was an iPhone involved, and Apple wouldn't open it for them.
Yeah.
It wouldn't allow the FBI to have access to it. And people were furious. And they were like, if this starts here, this does not end well.
Yeah.
And I kind of saw their point, but I kind of saw the FBI's point too. Like, you just open this one. This guy's clearly a murderer, has killed a ton of people, and created this terrorist incident.
Yeah, but I mean, it was a little disingenuous too, right? Where it's like the FBI had their entire iCloud backup for this device. The only thing they didn't have was the previous 2 hours or something like that. And the reason they didn't have it is because they fucked up and approached it in the wrong way and got themselves locked out of it.
Oh, really?
And so it's it was their own mistake that led to the situation where they didn't have the iCloud backup. So then it's what are you really going to get off this phone? It's the actual possibility of what was there was extremely marginal.
So do you think what they really want is the tools to be able to get into other people's phones?
Where they've just been waiting, for the moment of okay, here we go. We got terrorists. We got,
That makes sense. What did you think when the State Department or whoever it was banned Huawei phones?
Yeah.
Did you think there was...
I mean, yeah, it's mostly political, right? It's complicated, right? Because there's companies like Huawei and what the Tencent,
OnePlus.
the people who make TikTok.
Oh, okay.
Tencent,
Yeah.
you know, like they're doing like all the sketchy shit. But it's the same sketchy shit that like all of Silicon Valley is doing. You know, like it's not.
Is it really? Is that a valid comparison to what they're doing in Silicon Valley? Like Huawei did have routers that had third-party access apparently, and they were shown that information was going to a third party that was not supposed to be, right? Wasn't that part of the issue?
Am
I reading this wrong?
Well, I think there's like a couple. There have been incidents where it's like, there's like data collection that's happening.
Yeah.
Well, there's data collection happening like in all Western products too. You know, like, I mean, and actually the way the Western products are designed are really scary. I mean, in the telecommunications space, there's a legal requirement called CALIA, Communications and Law Enforcement Act or something like that, that requires telecommunications equipment to have eavesdropping, like surveillance stuff built into it. Like when you produce the hardware, in order to sell it in the United States, you have to
Like
have,
which hardware?
like phone switches and stuff. You know?
Okay.
It's like when you make a normal phone call, it has to have I forget what they call it, like
The ability to tap.
yeah, they call it something else, but it has to have this ability to record conversations, intercept, lawful intercept. That's
What
it's
is
called.
how does a signal call work?
So signal calls work not using the traditional telecommunications infrastructure. It is routing data over the internet, and that data is end-to-end encrypted, so nobody can eavesdrop on those calls, including us. But so communication equipment that is produced in the United States has to have this lawful intercept, so-called lawful intercept capability. But what's crazy about that is that's the same, it's like these are U.S. companies and they're selling that all around the world. So that's the shit that gets shipped to UAE. And it's the shit, so it's like, it's the secondary effect thing of like the United States government was like, well, we're going to be responsible with this or whatever. We're going to have warrants or whatever. And even that's not true. And then that same equipment gets shipped to tyrants and, repressive regimes all over the place. And they've just got it a ready-made thing to to surveil everyone's phone calls. So it's like, I don't know. It's hard to indict Huawei for acting substantially different than the way whatever the U.S. industry acts. It's just certainly they have a different political environment, and they are much more willing to use that information to do really brutal stuff.
Well, it wasn't just that they banned Huawei devices, but they also banned them from using Google. That's when I thought, like, wow, this is really, like, what do they know? Or what has been...
Oh, Google didn't allow... Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Google has... Android... You're talking about, like, so-called Android devices.
They can't use the Android operating system anymore. They have to now... They've developed their own operating system, and now they have their own ecosystem. They have their own app store, the whole deal.
Yeah. But that's also... that's a business thing, where it's like... Google's control over, Google is producing this software, Android, and it's just free. They're releasing it, but they want to maintain some control over the ecosystem because it's their thing that they're producing, and so they have a lot of requirements about. It's like, it's like, okay, you can run Android. Oh, you want all this other stuff that we make that's not part of just like the stock free thing, like Play services and all the Google stuff, and increasingly more and more of Android is just getting shoved into this proprietary bit, and they're like, okay, you want access to this, then it's going to cost you in these ways, and I think it got to the point where Huawei was just like, we're not willing to pay, even either monetarily or through whatever compromise they would have to make, and they were just like, we're going to do our own thing.
I thought it was because of the State Department's boycott.
It could have also been that there was a legal requirement that they stopped doing that.
Yeah, I think I might be. Jamie will find out. I think I might be right, but I'm not sure though. But it just made me think. Like I understand that there's a sort of a connection that can't be broken between business and government in China, and that business and government are united. It's not like like Apple and the FBI, right? In China they would just give them the phone.
Of course, yeah. They developed the
they would help. They would have the tools to already get into it. They wouldn't have to have this conversation.
Exactly. They just send it directly to the people.
What we're terrified of is that these relationships that business and government have in this country, they're getting tighter and tighter intertwined. And we look at a country like China that does have this sort of inexorable connection between business and government. And we're terrified that we're going to be like that someday.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it just it? It is what it is?
Yeah. I mean, I think, a lot of what Snowden was revealing was like, that there are already these relationships, the NSA called it PRISM, and, tech companies just called it like the consoles or whatever that they had built for these, for these requests. But it's, it's happening. And also, it's sort of like, I think a lot of nations look at China and are envious, right? Where it's like, they've done this thing where they just, they built like the Great Firewall of China, and that has served them in a lot of ways. One, surveillance, obviously, like they have total control of everything that appears on the internet. So not just surveillance, but also content moderation, propaganda, but then also like it allows them to have their own internet economy, where like China is large enough that they can have their own ecosystem where like, Google, people don't use Google there, people don't use, they have their own chat apps, they have their own search engines, they have their own social networks, they have their own everything. And I think a lot of nations like look at China and they're just like, that was kind of smart. It's like you have your own ecosystem, your own infrastructure that you control, and you have like the ability to do content moderation, and you have the ability to do surveillance. And so I think the fear is that there's going to be like a balkanization of the internet where, Russia will be next, and then every country that has an economy large enough will go down the same road.
Was it, Jamie?
There was it seemed like there's a couple things that happened that are what you're saying, but directly seems to be
sweeping crackdown on facial recognition tech. House and Senate Democrats on Tuesday rolled out a legislation to halt federal use of facial recognition software and require state and local authorities to pause any use of the technology to receive federal funding. The Facial Recognition and Biometric Technology Moratorium Act, introduced Thursday, marks one of the most ambitious crackdowns on This has to do with that?
It said it was part of this boycott that had to do with Google's antitrust suit. That also had to do with Facebook, and they were looking into it. This is from like a month ago.
I mean, I think this is connected to what you're saying, just in the sense that like, the people who are producing that facial recognition technology, it's not the government. It's Palantir or whoever selling services to the government, and then the government is then deploying this technology that they're getting from industry, and in kind of crazy ways. Like there's the story of the Black Lives Matter protester who was the police, that like NYPD, not like the FBI, or, NYPD like tracked him to his house using facial recognition technology. And so it's
how did they do that?
There's a story about it in like, or something like that.
I've been finding stories. No one knows what these things are. There's things supposedly all over New York City and Manhattan that are tracking everybody's face as soon as they go in there. And I've watched news videos from local New York, local media asking people, have you seen these? What are they? They get no answers.
Well, here's what's hilarious. Crime has never been higher. New York City crime right now is insane. That shit's not doing anything.
Yeah.
Well, everyone's wearing a mask, too. That's also part of the problem.
But I think, the fear is that, like, so there's this, like, circle of, like, industry producing technology that is going into government, and, like, stuff like facial recognition technology just makes existing power structures much more difficult to contest.
Do you use facial recognition on your phone?
No, I don't have any apps or anything that use it.
You don't know with your iPhone?
Oh, no, I just have a pen. Yeah.
Oh, you don't use it. What's going on, Jimmy? New York City Police Department uses facial recognition software to track down a Black Lives Matter activist accused of assault after allegedly shouting into a police officer's ear with a bullhorn. That's it? The man. What about that guy who punched Rick Moranis? You fucks.
They found him.
They did?
Yeah,
Where
like
is
last
he?
week. Right in
Really?
jail. But they did find him.
How'd they find him?
They have facial recognition, Joe.
But he wear a mask.
I don't know.
Anyway, listen, I think what you're doing is very important, and I love the fact that you approach things the way you do, and that you really are this idealistic person that's not trying to make money off of this stuff, and you're doing it because you think it's the right thing to do. And if there is a resistance, people like you are very important. Like what you've done by creating Signal. It's very important. There's not a lot of other options, and there's no other options that I think are as secure or as viable.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah.
Um,
I appreciate you saying that.
and I support it, and I try to tell other people to use it as well. Last word. You have anything to say to everybody before we wrap this up?
It's a lot of pressure.
Sorry.
Can I put out a public
Yeah.
plea for
Yes.
a project I'm trying to work on?
Sure.
Okay, I'm vaguely obsessed with this thing that happened in the 60s. Are you familiar with the Soviet space dogs? So the first animal in space was a
Okay.
dog
Yeah.
named Laika. Laika died in space, sadly. The second animal in space was a dog called Strelka. Strelka went to space, made it back to Earth, and had puppies.
Whoa. Those puppies can read minds.
When Khrushchev came to visit JFK in 1965, he brought with him the ultimate insult gift, which was one of the puppies.
That's an
Yes.
insult?
Oh, dude. It's like, oh, do you have anything that's been to space? We have extra puppies. You know, do you want one? You know,
That's an insult?
dude, it's the ultimate insult gift. Like the United States
Wow.
had no space program, had never been, the Soviet Union was like way ahead of them. They're like, oh, we've just got extra animals that have been to space. Like, here, have one, you know?
It's a puppy. Stop being so personal. That's what I would tell Kennedy. Just take the puppy,
Well,
bro.
Kennedy took the puppy. Kennedy took the puppy. The puppy had a Cold War romance with one of Kennedy's dogs, and they had puppies
Oh, snap.
that the Kennedys called the Pupniks. And the Pupniks captivated the imagination of children across America because Jackie Kennedy said something. She was like, I don't know what we're going to do with the dogs, you know? And that ignited a spontaneous letter writing campaign from children across America who all requested one of the puppies. Jackie Kennedy selected 2 children in America whose names were Mark Bruce and Karen House. And she delivered 2 puppies to each of these people. One of them lived in Missouri. The other lived in Illinois. And I have sort of been obsessed with the idea that those puppies had puppies and that those puppies had puppies and that somewhere in the American Midwest today are the descendants of the original animals in space. The first animal to go to space and survive.
They've probably been watered down so heavily.
Maybe, but like,
Chihuahuas and German Shepherds and shit. And
well, they were all, they
Well,
were
there they
mutts.
are, right there.
They were mutts. They were random dogs that they found from around the like spaceport because they thought that they would be like tougher.
Oh, wow.
But they were small. And so, yeah, I've been obsessed with the idea that these dogs could still be out there, and I've been trying to find the dogs. So I've been trying to track down these 2 people, notably Karen House, because she got the female dog. And I think she's still alive, and I think she lives in the Chicago area, but I can't get in touch with her because I'm not an investigative journalist. I don't know how to do this or whatever. So if anybody knows anything about the whereabouts of Karen House or the descendants of the Soviet space dogs, I'm very interested. My goal is just to meet one, you know?
How should someone get in touch with you?
I'm on the internet. Yeah,
Okay.
Moxie.
Just like that.
Yeah.
I'm on the internet. My name is Moxie. I love it. Thanks, man. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah,
Thank you. Bye, everybody.